Humans are built for connection. From the moment we are born, we seek the comfort of others. Our first cries are an instinctive call for attention, for care. As we grow, the need for relationships only deepens. We crave companionship, understanding, and intimacy. At our core, we want to feel seen, heard, and valued by others. However, even though we deeply desire connection, we often build walls to protect ourselves from the very vulnerability that true connection requires. The fear of being vulnerable is a common experience. Vulnerability is seen as a form of weakness in many parts of society. We are taught to protect ourselves, to shield our emotions, and to maintain a facade of strength. We hear phrases like, "Don't let them see you sweat," or "Keep your guard up." This advice, often well-meaning, creates an environment where showing our true selves can feel like a risk. The fear is that if we let others see who we really are, flaws, fears, insecurities, we might be rejected or judged. It's easier to hide behind a mask, to present a version of ourselves that feels safer but less authentic. But the irony is that the very walls we build to protect ourselves also block the depth of connection we long for. In the end, shallow interactions leave us feeling more isolated, not less. We crave relationships where we can be real, where we can be our true selves, yet we often hide behind layers of what we think others expect of us. This contradiction causes internal conflict, as we yearn for closeness but simultaneously push it away out of fear. Think about a conversation with a friend. On the surface, everything might seem fine. You talk about your day, exchange pleasantries, maybe even share a joke. But how often do we reveal the deeper parts of ourselves? How often do we talk about our worries, our vulnerabilities, or our dreams that feel too risky to share? These deeper connections are what truly nourish relationships, but the fear of being judged or misunderstood keeps us from opening up fully. This fear of vulnerability isn't just about revealing weaknesses. It's also about revealing our desires, our dreams, and our true feelings. We might fear being seen as too much or not enough. It's easy to convince ourselves that we are safer in our comfort zones, hiding the parts of ourselves that are the most human. But without these raw moments of honesty, we miss the opportunity for real connection. The desire for deep relationships is innate, yet the fear of vulnerability holds us back. When we withhold our true selves, we create a distance, a gap, between ourselves and others. In a sense, we keep people at arm's length, even though we long for closeness. We may even end up feeling lonely in the midst of our closest relationships, because we haven't shared what truly matters to us. Consider the dynamic of a romantic relationship. The beginning of such a connection is often filled with excitement and possibility. Both people are eager to impress one another, to show their best selves. Yet, it's not until both individuals begin to share their deeper emotions, their fears, past experiences, and vulnerabilities, that the relationship begins to truly deepen. But sharing these parts of ourselves is not always easy. It's scary to open up and risk rejection, especially when we are unsure how the other person will respond. There is always that voice in our head saying, "What if they don't accept me for who I really am?" It's not just in romantic relationships where vulnerability plays a role. In friendships, too, we often struggle with being open. Friendships, at their core, thrive on mutual trust. But trust is built through shared experiences, open communication, and being willing to show up as our authentic selves. The problem is, we often hold back. We hesitate to share our struggles, our inner thoughts, or the parts of ourselves that we believe are less than perfect. But when we do share, when we let down our guard, it's then that we truly bond with others. The depth of a friendship is found not in how much we have in common on the surface, but in the willingness to be real with each other. It's also important to consider how society shapes our relationship with vulnerability. In many cultures, emotional expression is often discouraged, particularly for certain groups. For example, men are frequently taught to suppress their emotions, to appear stoic and unshaken. This creates a barrier to emotional intimacy, as expressing vulnerability becomes associated with weakness. However, when we refuse to be vulnerable, we miss out on opportunities to connect on a deeper level, to truly understand one another. Another aspect of vulnerability is its connection to self-acceptance. It's easy to avoid showing vulnerability when we haven't fully accepted ourselves. If we don't love and embrace who we are, flaws and all, it becomes difficult to open up to others. Self-acceptance is the foundation for being vulnerable with others. When we accept ourselves, we are more likely to trust others with the parts of ourselves that we have learned to love and accept. In this way, vulnerability can be a path to greater self-awareness and growth. Despite the fear, vulnerability is not a weakness. It's a strength. It takes courage to show up as your true self, without the masks and pretenses. It's hard to share your deepest fears and desires, but doing so builds connections that are real and lasting. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create the space for others to do the same. This shared vulnerability is what forms the foundation of deep, meaningful relationships. The process of embracing vulnerability starts with small steps. It begins with acknowledging the fear and pushing through it, even when it feels uncomfortable. It's about taking the risk of being real with one person, maybe a friend or a loved one, and seeing how it feels. Once we begin to open up, even in small ways, we start to realize that vulnerability doesn't have to be something to fear. It's actually the gateway to the connection we seek. Ultimately, the more we practice vulnerability, the easier it becomes. Over time, it becomes less about the fear of judgment and more about the joy of being understood. As we embrace our vulnerability, we invite others to do the same. And in that space of shared honesty and openness, we find the deep connections that we have always longed for. Humans are caught between two desires, the need for freedom and the longing for structure. We often hear people talk about wanting to live freely, without constraints. It's a powerful idea. Freedom feels like the ultimate form of self-expression, where we can do what we want, when we want, without being held back. Yet, at the same time, we often feel overwhelmed by too much freedom. In reality, we crave structure. We want some kind of rules, guidelines, or frameworks to help us make sense of the world. We want freedom, but we also want something to push against, something to give us direction. Freedom can be intoxicating. It's the idea that we can make choices without being controlled. It's the allure of the open road, the ability to create our own path without needing permission. But when we are truly free, when there are no rules or restrictions, it can feel daunting. The possibilities seem endless, and while that might sound ideal, it can often be paralyzing. We wonder, where do we start? What do we do first? How do we know if we're making the right choice? Without structure, the freedom we seek can become an overwhelming flood of options, and the pressure to make the right choice can lead to indecision and frustration. In contrast, structure provides the clarity we need. A set of rules, guidelines, or routines gives us a framework within which we can operate. It offers a sense of security and predictability. Structure can feel like a safety net, allowing us to navigate the complexities of life without fear of falling. It gives us a path to follow, making it easier to make decisions and focus on what matters. Without structure, we might feel like we are drifting, unsure of where we are heading. Yet, while we often seek structure, we also feel a need to rebel against it. We don't want to be completely confined by rules. The more rigid the structure, the more we might feel trapped. We start to crave the freedom to break away, to test the boundaries, to push against the system. There's a certain thrill in challenging authority, in bending or breaking the rules. This tension between the need for structure and the desire for freedom is part of what makes us human. We want the security that structure provides, but we also need the space to explore and create. This dynamic can be seen in many aspects of life. In the workplace, for example, employees often appreciate clear guidelines and expectations. A well-structured environment helps them understand their role and what is expected of them. It creates efficiency and order. But when that structure becomes too rigid, when there is little room for creativity or autonomy, employees may begin to feel stifled. They may long for the freedom to make their own decisions, to think outside the box. The same can happen in personal relationships. We might crave the stability of commitment, but we also want the freedom to be ourselves, to act without constantly worrying about someone else's expectations. The need for freedom and structure also plays out in how we approach goals and personal development. On the one hand, we want the freedom to choose our own path, to explore different interests, and to grow in our own way. We resist being boxed into one specific direction. But on the other hand, we know that in order to achieve anything, we need some kind of structure. Without deadlines, plans, or steps to follow, our goals might remain distant dreams. Structure doesn't limit us. It actually helps us focus our energy and take concrete steps toward achieving what we want. Still, there's always a part of us that resists feeling too controlled, that seeks to push back against any system that feels too limiting. This tension is particularly evident in how we relate to rules. Rules are meant to keep things orderly, to create consistency and fairness. They help guide behavior and ensure that things run smoothly. But rules can also feel restrictive. They can make us feel like we are being told exactly how to behave, and that can feel uncomfortable. This is why, when faced with rules, we often look for ways to bend or break them. It's not necessarily that we don't understand their purpose, but that we want to assert our independence and autonomy. We want to remind ourselves and others that we can choose, that we are not bound by restrictions. The desire for structure without being overwhelmed by it is also seen in our personal lives. We may seek out routines, knowing that they can help us stay organized and productive. But when those routines become too rigid, when they start to feel like another form of restriction, we might rebel. We might decide to break from the routine, to do something spontaneous, just to remind ourselves that we have the power to make choices. The key is finding balance. We want enough structure to feel grounded, but not so much that we lose our sense of freedom. In fact, it's often the tension between freedom and structure that drives creativity and innovation. Creative individuals, whether they are artists, writers, or entrepreneurs, often operate in a space between the two. They work within a structure, whether it's a deadline, a creative brief, or a business plan. But within that framework, they are free to explore new ideas, take risks, and push boundaries. Without the structure, they might feel directionless. Without the freedom, their creativity might feel stifled. The most successful people and projects often find a way to navigate this tension, allowing structure to provide a foundation while freedom provides the space for growth and exploration. Our relationship with freedom and structure also affects how we experience stress and anxiety. Too much structure can feel like a trap. We start to feel like we are just going through the motions, following rules without thinking for ourselves. On the other hand, too much freedom can also create stress. The pressure of endless choices and possibilities can lead to feelings of uncertainty and overwhelm. We crave balance, a sense that we have enough structure to give us purpose and direction, but enough freedom to allow for spontaneity and growth. Ultimately, our need for freedom and structure is not a contradiction. It's a dynamic relationship that shapes how we live and navigate the world. We want to feel free to explore, to make our own choices. But we also want the security that comes with having rules and guidelines to help us along the way. It's not about choosing one over the other. It's about finding a way to balance them in a way that works for us. We need both freedom and structure, and understanding how to manage this tension is key to living a fulfilling life. We all want to be happy. It's a basic human desire, a goal that drives much of what we do. We dream of a life where we feel content, fulfilled, and at peace. But often, instead of moving toward the things that actually bring us lasting happiness, we end up chasing things that make us unhappy. We focus on external measures of success, money, status, validation, thinking that these things will bring us the happiness we seek. However, more often than not, they don't. Money is one of the most common things we chase. We think that if we just have enough of it, everything else will fall into place. If we can pay off our debts, buy the things we want, and live in comfort, we'll be happy. But while money can make life easier and remove some stress, it doesn't guarantee happiness. In fact, the pursuit of wealth can sometimes make us less happy. We can become obsessed with acquiring more, measuring our success by the size of our bank account, and comparing ourselves to others who have more. This constant chase can lead to stress, dissatisfaction, and a sense of emptiness. We might end up working long hours or sacrificing personal time in the name of earning more, only to find that the extra money doesn't actually improve our well-being. The desire for money can become all-consuming, leaving us with less time for the people and experiences that truly make us happy. Status is another thing many people chase. We want to be seen as successful, admired, or respected. We look for recognition, for others to acknowledge our achievements, our appearance, or our position in life. We believe that if we just have the right job, the right title, or the right social media following, we'll be happy. But status is a fleeting thing. It's based on how others perceive us, and their opinions can change quickly. The more we focus on status, the more we rely on external validation to feel good about ourselves. This leaves us vulnerable to feelings of inadequacy and insecurity, especially when we don't receive the recognition we expect. We may also spend so much time trying to maintain our status that we lose sight of what truly matters to us. The pursuit of status often takes us further from happiness, not closer to it. Validation, too, is something many of us chase in an attempt to feel fulfilled. We seek approval from others, whether it's from friends, family, coworkers, or strangers on the internet. We want people to like us, to tell us that we're doing well, to affirm that we are worthy of love and respect. This need for validation can drive our decisions, pushing us to do things not because we want to, but because we want others to notice and praise us. It might lead us to constantly seek compliments or attention, always looking for the next boost to our self-esteem. But this kind of external validation is unreliable. It's fleeting. People's opinions change, and the validation we receive can never fully satisfy our deeper need for self-acceptance. The more we rely on others to tell us our worth, the less we feel in control of our own happiness. We become dependent on external factors, which makes us vulnerable to disappointment and self-doubt. These things, money, status, and validation, are not inherently bad. In fact, they can be useful and necessary in many ways. But the problem arises when we make them the sole focus of our lives. When we believe that acquiring them will bring us lasting happiness, we end up focusing on the wrong things. We chase after things that give us temporary satisfaction but fail to provide the deeper fulfillment we're looking for. Happiness isn't found in the things we accumulate or the approval we seek from others. It's found within ourselves, in the way we approach life and the choices we make. True happiness comes from having a sense of purpose, from nurturing meaningful relationships, from doing work that we find fulfilling, and from taking care of our mental and emotional well-being. It comes from living in a way that aligns with our values and beliefs, not in a way that is dictated by the expectations of others or the pursuit of material success. The key to happiness is understanding that it isn't something that can be bought or earned through external achievements. It's something that comes from within, from how we feel about ourselves and how we engage with the world around us. When we stop chasing things that only provide temporary pleasure and start focusing on what truly matters, connection, personal growth, peace of mind, we begin to find the happiness we've been seeking all along. For example, think about a time when you felt truly happy. Was it because you had just bought something new or received praise from someone else? Or was it because you were spending quality time with loved ones, accomplishing something meaningful, or feeling at peace with who you are? The moments of true happiness often come from experiences, not possessions. They come from being present, from connecting with others, from doing things that align with our passions and values. This doesn't mean that money, status, or validation have no place in our lives. They do, but they shouldn't be the driving forces behind our happiness. When we place too much importance on them, we end up chasing something that is elusive and unreliable. We may achieve some of our goals, but we may still feel empty or unsatisfied because these external achievements don't address our deeper needs. What's often missing in the chase for these external rewards is a sense of gratitude and contentment with what we already have. When we focus on what we lack, whether it's more money, more status, or more recognition, we ignore the wealth of things in our lives that bring us joy. The people who love us, the skills we've developed, the moments of peace we've experienced. These are the things that contribute to real happiness. But they are easy to overlook when we're constantly chasing after the next big thing. The path to happiness doesn't require us to achieve more or acquire more. It requires us to stop looking outside ourselves for fulfillment and start looking within. When we learn to appreciate what we already have, when we cultivate a sense of self-worth that doesn't depend on others' opinions, when we focus on building meaningful relationships and pursuing things that bring us joy, we find that happiness is much closer than we think. We all want to feel like we are unique, that we stand out in some way. There's a part of us that craves individuality, the desire to express who we truly are and to be recognized for our unique qualities. Yet, at the same time, we fear standing out too much. We worry about being judged or misunderstood, and sometimes we prefer to blend in. We want to be seen as special, but not in a way that makes us feel isolated. This creates a push and pull inside of us. On one hand, we want to assert our individuality, and on the other, we want to belong. The idea of being unique is deeply rooted in our sense of identity. We want to feel like we matter, that we are different from others in a way that is meaningful. It could be the way we dress, the music we listen to, or the opinions we hold. We seek to carve out a space for ourselves in the world, where we can shine in our own way. There is something powerful about standing out, about knowing that we have something to offer that no one else does. It's part of what drives creativity and personal growth. Finding our voice, expressing it, and feeling that it is valued. However, there is also a natural human instinct to want to fit in, to belong to a group, a community, or a society. It's a basic need. Belonging provides comfort, security, and acceptance. It allows us to connect with others, to share experiences, and to feel that we are part of something larger than ourselves. When we feel like we belong, we don't have to constantly prove ourselves or worry about whether we are accepted. We can relax knowing that we are part of the group. But the desire to belong can sometimes conflict with our desire to be unique. When we try to stand out, we risk drawing attention to ourselves in ways that may not be comfortable. Standing out often means going against the grain, doing things that others might not understand or appreciate. It could mean wearing clothes that are different from the norm or speaking out about ideas that challenge the status quo. But when we do this, we risk feeling alienated. Others might judge us or treat us as outsiders, and the fear of rejection can be overwhelming. In those moments, the desire to belong can outweigh the desire to be unique, leading us to suppress parts of ourselves in order to fit in. This conflict between individuality and the need to belong is evident in many areas of life. Take school, for example. As children and teenagers, we are often deeply concerned with fitting in. We want to be accepted by our peers, to be part of the popular group, or to be seen as normal. During these years, standing out can feel like a threat. Those who do stand out might be labeled as different, weird, or strange. This can lead to feelings of insecurity and a desire to hide parts of ourselves that make us unique. However, as we grow older, many of us start to realize that being unique is something to embrace. We start to recognize that our individuality is what makes us who we are. We may seek out people who appreciate us for our differences, finding communities where we can express ourselves freely. But even in adulthood, the tension between wanting to stand out and wanting to belong remains. In the workplace, for example, employees may feel the need to conform to the culture of the organization, even if it means suppressing their individuality. At the same time, they might also desire to stand out for their creativity or innovation, to be recognized for their unique contributions. But there's always the fear that standing out too much could lead to isolation or criticism. Social media has only amplified this tension. Platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook provide a space where everyone is encouraged to show their unique selves. People share their lives, opinions, and creative work, and in many ways, it feels like a celebration of individuality. But the pressure to be unique on social media is often tied to the desire for validation. We want to be seen, but we also want to be accepted. There's a fine line between standing out and feeling rejected. The fear of not measuring up can lead some to filter or alter their true selves to fit into a certain mold, while others might rebel by posting something radically different in an attempt to stand out. It's a constant balancing act between wanting to be noticed and wanting to feel like we belong. The fear of standing out can also be tied to the fear of failure. If we make a bold move, do something that others don't expect, or express ourselves in a way that is unconventional, we risk being judged. Failure, rejection, or criticism can feel like the price of standing out. In some cases, this fear can hold us back from pursuing the very things that make us unique. We might avoid taking risks, stifling our creativity or personal expression because we worry that it will set us apart in a way that is uncomfortable or unwelcomed. The result is that we may end up conforming to social expectations instead of fully embracing our individuality. But at the same time, there is something deeply fulfilling about embracing our uniqueness. It's in those moments when we stop worrying about how others see us and start focusing on what feels true to us that we experience a sense of freedom and satisfaction. When we stop comparing ourselves to others and instead celebrate what makes us different, we unlock the potential for real growth and connection. It's not about being so different that we alienate others, but about being authentic in a way that allows us to attract people who value us for who we are. In relationships, too, we see this dynamic at play. We want to connect with others, to feel understood and accepted, but at the same time, we don't want to lose ourselves in the process. It's easy to feel like we need to change or hide parts of ourselves to fit into a relationship, whether it's a friendship, a romantic partnership, or a family dynamic. The fear of not belonging can make us suppress our true selves in order to meet others' expectations. Yet, the most fulfilling relationships are often those where both people can express their individuality while still feeling a deep sense of connection. It's the balance between being true to yourself and being open to others that creates the strongest bonds. In the end, the desire to be unique and the need to belong don't have to be in conflict. They can coexist. It's about finding spaces and people who allow us to be ourselves fully, without the fear of judgment or rejection. It's about embracing our differences, while also understanding that we are all part of a larger whole. We don't have to sacrifice our individuality in order to fit in, and we don't have to lose the sense of belonging in the pursuit of uniqueness. It's about finding a balance where we can stand out in a way that feels authentic to us, while still feeling a connection to the people and communities that support and accept us. We all long for peace. It's a natural desire to feel calm, settled, and at ease with ourselves and the world around us. Peace brings a sense of security and well-being, a break from the chaos that often surrounds us. Whether it's the quiet of a morning with no distractions or the serenity of being with loved ones in a peaceful setting, peace is something we actively seek. Yet, at the same time, we are often drawn to conflict. We seem to have a complex relationship with drama, whether it's in our own lives or in the world around us. We crave harmony, but we are also wired to engage in struggle, both internally and externally. On one hand, peace is something that provides clarity and stability. When we experience peace, our minds can rest. We can think clearly, make decisions without pressure, and enjoy the present moment. This sense of peace often feels like the goal we are all trying to reach. It's why many people seek it in their personal lives, whether through quiet time, meditation, or simply trying to eliminate distractions. In the world, we look for peace through diplomacy, cooperation, and compromise. We imagine a world where there is no war, no hate, no conflict. The idea of global peace is something that has been pursued by many throughout history, and on a personal level, we all desire a life free from constant struggle. However, even as we seek peace, we often find ourselves drawn to conflict. It's almost as if conflict and drama are a part of our nature. Whether it's arguing with a friend, engaging in a difficult conversation with a loved one, or following the latest political turmoil in the news, we seem to be wired for conflict. There is something compelling about drama, something that grabs our attention and pulls us in. It's not that we want to create chaos, but there is an undeniable attraction to the tension and excitement that conflict can bring. Part of this draw to conflict is rooted in human nature. Conflict challenges us, forces us to confront difficult emotions, ideas, and situations. It pushes us out of our comfort zones and forces us to think and act in ways we might not otherwise. The struggle can be a source of growth, forcing us to reflect on our values, beliefs, and boundaries. In many ways, conflict is necessary for change and progress. It can spark innovation, drive us to solve problems, and lead to new perspectives. Without conflict, life might feel stagnant, lacking the energy and movement that come from challenge. On an internal level, we also experience this tension between peace and conflict. We all have moments when we feel conflicted within ourselves, torn between different desires, values, or fears. We might want to stay calm, but feel our emotions rising in a stressful situation. We might want to avoid confrontation, but find ourselves drawn to express our anger or frustration. This internal drama can be exhausting, as we struggle to reconcile our desire for peace with the impulses that push us toward conflict. The pull between the two can create confusion, leaving us uncertain of what we truly want. Take a moment to think about times in your life when you found yourself in an argument, even when you knew that walking away or staying calm would have been better. It might be with a partner, a friend, or even a stranger. Despite knowing that peace would bring a resolution, there's something about conflict that feels necessary in those moments. It's almost as if the confrontation is needed to validate our emotions or to make ourselves heard. We often don't want to back down because doing so would mean suppressing our feelings, and that can feel like a loss. The drama, as uncomfortable as it may be, sometimes feels like a way to express ourselves and stand our ground. At the same time, conflict can offer excitement. There's an energy that comes with disagreement or opposition. It can feel like the spark of something new, the possibility of change or breakthrough. In some cases, people might even seek out conflict because they feel that the tension will lead to something important. In relationships, for example, arguments can be a way of clearing the air, addressing underlying issues, and creating a deeper understanding. Without these moments of conflict, relationships might not evolve. But this doesn't mean that conflict is always productive. Often, it leads to hurt feelings, misunderstandings, and a sense of disconnection. Even so, the attraction to conflict remains, and we find ourselves engaging in it even when we know the cost. Externally, conflict is all around us. The news, social media, and entertainment industries often thrive on drama. From heated political debates to celebrity feuds, the world seems to feed off of conflict, captures our attention, and keeps us engaged. There's something about conflict, whether it's big or small, that keeps us coming back for more. We want to understand the sides, pick a side, and sometimes feel a sense of involvement in something larger than ourselves. This external drama often mirrors the internal conflicts we experience, and it can make us feel connected to a shared human experience. The more we witness conflict, the more we might be drawn to engage in it ourselves, as if it's a natural part of being alive. However, this constant exposure to conflict can also be draining. It can lead to stress, anxiety, and a sense of helplessness. When the world seems to be constantly in turmoil, it's hard to feel peaceful. We can become consumed by the drama, unable to escape it, even when we long for tranquility. The balance between seeking peace and being drawn to conflict is delicate. We want to disengage from the noise and find moments of calm, but at the same time, we are wired to stay engaged with the world around us, including the conflict that defines much of it. Ultimately, the desire for peace and the pull of conflict are both integral parts of our human experience. They are not opposing forces, but two sides of the same coin. Conflict drives us to grow, challenge ourselves, and confront the complexities of life, while peace offers a refuge from the chaos, a place of rest and clarity. The key is learning how to navigate between the two. There are times when conflict is necessary, and times when peace is the better choice. Both are part of our nature, and both have their place in our lives. Learning to recognize when to seek peace and when to engage with conflict is a skill that helps us find balance in the midst of the drama and calm of life. Death is something we all fear. It's the ultimate unknown, a finality that none of us can avoid. It is natural to fear the end of life, to worry about what comes after, or whether we will leave a lasting impact. The thought of death often prompts us to reflect on our lives, sometimes pushing us to consider what truly matters. We know, deep down, that life is short, that our time here is limited. And yet, despite this awareness, many of us still waste time. We procrastinate, get caught up in trivial matters, and put off the things that really matter. Knowing that our time is finite doesn't always inspire us to live more fully or with greater purpose. The fear of death often causes us to avoid thinking about it. We push it to the back of our minds, as if ignoring it will somehow make it less real. But in doing so, we also avoid fully engaging with life. The awareness of our mortality should, in theory, encourage us to make the most of each day. We should strive to live with more intention, to cherish our moments, and to focus on what truly brings us joy and fulfillment. Yet, instead of using the knowledge of life's brevity as a motivator, we often get stuck in routines that feel safe but unfulfilling. We let the days slip by without truly living in the moment. We are constantly distracted by the demands of daily life. The pressure to work, pay bills, meet expectations, and take care of responsibilities often takes up all of our energy. When we focus on these things, it can be easy to lose sight of what truly matters. Time becomes a blur, and before we know it, days, months, and years pass without us having taken the time to truly appreciate them. It's like we're running on autopilot, getting through the motions without ever asking ourselves if we are living in a way that aligns with our deepest values and desires. Consider how many of us spend our time worrying about things that ultimately don't matter. We stress over small setbacks, obsess over things that are out of our control, or get caught in drama and distractions. We waste time on social media or watching endless entertainment, when what we really long for is connection, purpose, or adventure. We know that these distractions don't add value to our lives, but we turn to them because they offer temporary relief from the uncomfortable truth of mortality. The fear of death often makes us seek out ways to avoid facing the deeper questions about how we want to live and what kind of legacy we want to leave behind. Even when we know that life is short, we often put off the things that could bring us the most fulfillment. We wait for the right time to pursue our dreams or to have meaningful conversations with loved ones. We tell ourselves that we will travel when we have more money, that we will spend more time with family once we're less busy, or that we will start working on our passions once we retire. But the truth is, the right time often never comes. We keep postponing living fully, assuming that there will be plenty of time left. But every moment that we waste, we are one step closer to running out of time. And when that time comes, we may look back and realize that we didn't make the most of it. The fear of death is part of being human. It's natural to want to hold on to life to avoid thinking about the end. But it can also be a motivator if we let it be. When we acknowledge that our time is limited, it can encourage us to prioritize what truly matters. The challenge is not in the knowledge of death itself, but in how we choose to respond to it. We can either let the fear of death paralyze us, causing us to waste our time and energy on things that don't matter, or we can use that fear as a reminder to live intentionally and with purpose. Living fully doesn't necessarily mean doing something dramatic or extreme. It doesn't mean quitting your job and traveling the world, or constantly seeking new thrills. For some, living fully means nurturing relationships, spending time with people they care about, or making a positive impact in their community. For others, it might mean pursuing a creative passion or simply taking the time to enjoy the present moment. The key is to recognize what truly brings us joy and fulfillment and to prioritize those things over the distractions and demands that can so easily take over our lives. Think about the times when you felt truly alive, when you were doing something that felt meaningful, when you were fully present, when you weren't distracted by worries about the past or future. These moments of clarity are reminders that life is about more than just getting through the day. It's about being present, about making choices that align with who we are and what we value. Yet, even when we experience these moments, it's easy to slip back into old habits, to get caught up in the routines that keep us feeling safe but disconnected from our true desires. One reason we waste time is that we often don't know how to deal with our fear of death. Instead of acknowledging it and using it as a source of motivation, we push it away, refusing to confront the reality of our mortality. This avoidance leads us to focus on things that, in the grand scheme of life, don't matter. We get caught up in the pressure to succeed, to accumulate wealth, or to gain status, thinking that these things will give our lives meaning. But in the end, these pursuits often leave us feeling empty. They don't provide the fulfillment we crave because they don't address the deeper needs of the soul, the need for connection, purpose, and self-acceptance. The fear of death is not something to overcome but something to embrace. When we allow ourselves to truly feel the weight of our mortality, we are reminded that each day is precious. This awareness doesn't have to make us anxious or depressed. Instead, it can inspire us to live more fully. It can prompt us to take action, to stop waiting for the perfect moment, and to start living in a way that aligns with what we value most. It can remind us to connect with the people who matter, to pursue our passions, and to let go of the things that no longer serve us. The reality is that life is short. No one knows how much time we have left, and that's what makes each moment so valuable. The fear of death should not paralyze us. It should push us to live more intentionally. It should remind us that every day is an opportunity to make a choice, to spend time with loved ones, to do meaningful work, or to simply enjoy the beauty of the world around us. Life is fragile, and that fragility makes it all the more precious. If we can learn to face our fear of death and use it as a motivator, we can begin to live more fully and make the most of the time we have. We all want love. It's one of the most basic human desires, to connect with others, to feel seen, understood, and cared for. Love brings comfort and meaning. It makes life richer and more fulfilling. Yet, despite this deep yearning for connection, many of us find ourselves sabotaging the very relationships we desire. We push people away, often without fully understanding why. The fear of getting hurt is powerful, and it can lead us to take actions that create the distance we fear most. It's as if we're caught in a paradox. We want love, but we also fear the vulnerability it requires, so we push it away before it can get too close. The fear of being hurt is at the core of many of these self-sabotaging behaviors. Love requires us to open up, to be vulnerable, to show parts of ourselves that we often keep hidden. It means allowing someone else to see us at our most raw, without the walls we usually put up. This can be terrifying. What if the person we care about rejects us? What if we give too much of ourselves and get hurt in return? These fears can make us cautious, and sometimes that caution turns into actions that create distance or even cause the end of a relationship. Think about a relationship where you felt deeply invested. Maybe it was a romantic relationship, a close friendship, or even a bond with a family member. There was a point when you began to feel the pull of attachment, when you allowed yourself to care deeply. But then something triggered the fear. Could have been a small action or something that wasn't even a big deal at first. Perhaps it was a comment that felt like a slight, or maybe it was the fear of being left behind or abandoned. Whatever it was, it set off a chain of thoughts that led to pushing the other person away. You started to hold back, to pull away emotionally, to put up walls. The connection that once felt so natural now became strained, and in the end, you may have found yourself walking away, even though you didn't really want to. This pattern of self-sabotage is common in many relationships. We often fear that by giving too much, we will lose ourselves or be hurt. So we hold back emotionally, mentally, or even physically. We might push our partner away or avoid getting too close. We might create distance without even realizing it, saying things that make the other person feel unwelcome or rejecting them when they try to get closer. The fear of being vulnerable, of being hurt, makes us do the very thing that pushes love and connection out of our lives. It's not just romantic relationships where we sabotage ourselves. It happens in friendships, too. We might avoid getting too close to a friend, holding back from being fully open and honest. We might push them away when they try to support us, or withdraw when they need us most. In some cases, we might even test our friends to see if they'll stick around when things get tough, only to back off when they prove their loyalty. This need to test the strength of the relationship often comes from a fear that it won't be strong enough to withstand the vulnerability required in true connection. The fear of getting hurt can also cause us to play games in relationships, testing boundaries or creating uncertainty. We may act distant, as if we don't care, or we may play it cool, when inside, we are yearning for more closeness. This behavior is a defense mechanism, a way to protect ourselves from the pain we fear could come if we let our guard down. But in doing so, we end up creating the very situation we fear: a lack of closeness and intimacy, a relationship that is not as deep as it could be. This self-sabotaging behavior can be traced back to early experiences. For many people, past relationships, especially in childhood, shape how they view love and connection. If someone grew up in an environment where love was conditional or unreliable, they may develop a fear that love will always come with pain or loss. When we experience love that is withdrawn or conditional, it can create a deep sense of insecurity, leading us to believe that we must protect ourselves from the possibility of being hurt. As adults, this fear manifests in the way we behave in relationships. We may push people away because we are afraid they will leave us, or we might sabotage the relationship before it has the chance to fail. It's as if we are trying to control the outcome, but in doing so, we push the very love we want out of our lives. There is also the fear of losing ourselves in a relationship. We worry that if we give too much, we will forget who we are or become too dependent on the other person. The fear of losing our independence or becoming vulnerable to manipulation can make us pull back emotionally, even when we deeply care for the other person. We might create distance to protect ourselves from losing our sense of identity, but in the process, we lose the connection that makes love meaningful. The irony is that the very things we fear, being hurt, losing ourselves, or becoming dependent, are often the things that make relationships stronger when faced with honesty and trust. Vulnerability, while it does carry the risk of pain, also creates the space for deeper emotional intimacy and connection. Without vulnerability, love can feel shallow, transactional, or distant, but vulnerability requires trust, and trust is built over time. When we let down our guard and allow ourselves to be truly seen, we give the other person the chance to do the same. This exchange of openness and trust is what makes a relationship real and lasting. But in order to get there, we must first overcome our fear of being hurt and let ourselves be vulnerable. Self-sabotage in relationships is often unconscious. We may not even realize we are doing it until it's too late, until the distance has grown too wide to easily bridge. This is why it's important to become aware of the patterns that we fall into. When we start to recognize the fear behind our actions, we can begin to address it more consciously. Instead of pushing people away when we feel scared, we can try to communicate our fears. Instead of withdrawing when we're feeling vulnerable, we can ask for what we need. Relationships are not about being perfect. They're about being real, honest, and open. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we invite others to do the same. In the end, the desire for love and the fear of being hurt can coexist. The key is to not let fear control our actions. Love requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires trust. Trusting ourselves, trusting others, and trusting the process of deep connection is what allows love to grow and thrive. The more we embrace our fears, the more we create space for love to fill the gaps. We all want to be understood. It's a deeply human desire to feel that others truly know us, that they can see beyond our words and actions to the core of who we are. We want our thoughts, feelings, and intentions to be recognized, not just by those we love, but by the people around us in general. But too often, we find ourselves frustrated when others don't understand us, even though we rarely take the time to express ourselves clearly. We hope that others will just get us without us having to explain everything in detail, without having to lay out our inner world step by step. This unspoken expectation can create misunderstandings, leaving us feeling isolated and misunderstood, when in reality, we may be the ones withholding the clarity others need to truly understand us. There's something deeply comforting about the idea of being fully understood. It's like a silent connection that transcends the need for words. We hope that the people in our lives will just pick up on our emotions, our needs, and our thoughts without us needing to explain everything. This might come from a desire to be seen without the burden of constantly explaining ourselves. We don't want to have to dissect every feeling or motivation for others to get it. In relationships, we might think, if you love me, you should know how I feel. Or if you really understand me, you should know what I need without me having to say it. But the truth is, people don't have the same mind, perspective, or experience that we do. They can't automatically know what's inside us just because they're close to us. The expectation that others should understand us without clear communication often leads to frustration. When we don't take the time to explain our feelings or thoughts, the people around us can only guess at what we might be thinking or feeling. This is especially true in relationships where we might expect our partners, friends, or family members to read between the lines. But the problem is, not everyone has the same ability or intuition to pick up on subtle cues or nonverbal communication. What seems obvious to us might not be obvious to them, leading to confusion and, at times, hurt feelings. For example, think about a situation where you're upset, but you don't directly say why. Instead, you might assume that the other person will notice that you're upset and ask about it. But when they don't pick up on the clue or don't understand the reason behind your feelings, you may feel even more frustrated, thinking, why don't they just know? It's a cycle that can easily lead to conflict because we're not giving others the tools they need to understand us. Instead of being direct and explaining what we're feeling or why we're upset, we sometimes hope that others will somehow just get it. There's also the fear that expressing ourselves too clearly will make us vulnerable. If we explain everything about our thoughts, emotions, and needs, we open ourselves up to being misunderstood or rejected. This fear of vulnerability can keep us from communicating effectively. We might worry that if we say too much, we'll be judged or dismissed, so we opt for silence or vague hints, hoping the other person will pick up on the unspoken message. This is where the disconnect begins. The other person doesn't have the same context, experience, or understanding of our situation, and so they can't read our mind. The result is often miscommunication, feelings of isolation, or resentment, as neither party fully understands what the other needs. At the core of this is the idea that expressing ourselves clearly requires effort. It's easier to assume that someone should know what we mean or feel rather than taking the time to explain it. But clear communication is essential for any relationship, whether it's with a partner, friend, family member, or colleague. Without it, we create unnecessary gaps that only widen the distance between us and the people we care about. It's like trying to navigate a maze without a map. If we don't give clear directions, people won't be able to follow us. This struggle to be understood can also be amplified by our own insecurities. We might be afraid of how others will react to our true selves, so we hide parts of who we are, thinking that it's easier to just keep things to ourselves. For example, we may feel insecure about sharing our true desires or feelings because we fear rejection or ridicule. As a result, we end up communicating in indirect ways or withholding our true thoughts, hoping that others will understand what's beneath the surface. But the more we hold back, the less likely others are to truly understand us. They can't read our minds, and without our input, they can only guess at our intentions. In relationships, this often leads to frustration because one person may feel like they are giving more than they're receiving. They might feel like they're doing everything they can to show that they understand the other person's needs, but the other person isn't being clear about what they want or need in return. The relationship becomes a guessing game instead of a partnership based on mutual understanding. Without clarity, both people can end up feeling lonely and misunderstood, even if they're physically close. Take, for example, the way we communicate in romantic relationships. A partner might do something small that bothers us. Perhaps they forget to do something they promised, or we might feel neglected. Rather than expressing our thoughts and feelings clearly, we might wait, hoping the partner will notice our distress and address it on their own. When they don't, we may feel hurt or resentful, thinking, "Why don't they get it?" But the truth is, they likely don't know because we haven't communicated clearly. They might not even realize there's an issue. If we were to express our concerns directly, saying, "When you forgot to do that, I felt upset because it seemed like you didn't care," we would give them the opportunity to understand and respond. Clear communication takes away the guesswork and opens the door to deeper understanding. It's also easy to fall into the trap of hoping that people will understand us based on the way we feel, rather than how we express ourselves. We might believe that our feelings are obvious, but feelings are complex and often difficult to put into words. Without the proper context or explanation, even those who are close to us might not fully understand the depth of what we're experiencing. Expressing our feelings and thoughts in a way that others can clearly understand isn't just about making ourselves feel heard. It's about creating an opportunity for the other person to respond in a way that fosters connection and empathy. The desire to be understood is universal. However, we can't expect others to understand us without putting in the effort to communicate clearly. It's not enough to hope that people will just get us. We have to express our thoughts, feelings, and needs openly and directly. Doing so creates the space for real connection and deeper understanding. When we express ourselves clearly, we give others the opportunity to meet us where we are, to see us fully, and to respond with empathy and care. It's through this process of honest and open communication that true understanding can grow, strengthening our relationships and our sense of connection with others. We all hate being judged. It's uncomfortable, it feels unfair, and it can leave us feeling small or misunderstood. When someone judges us, it can be hurtful, especially if we feel that they don't truly know us or understand our circumstances. No one wants to feel like they're being evaluated or criticized based on superficial qualities or a single mistake. We crave acceptance, and judgment often makes us feel like we don't measure up. Yet, despite our strong dislike for being judged, we often find ourselves judging others. It's almost as if, while we resent the act when it's directed at us, we do it without hesitation when it's directed at someone else. It's easier to criticize than to be criticized, and that simple truth explains much about why we engage in judgmental behavior. Judging others often comes from a place of insecurity. When we criticize someone, we may feel a temporary sense of superiority. By pointing out what someone else is doing wrong or what they could be doing better, we make ourselves feel better in comparison. It's a way of lifting ourselves up without truly earning it by lowering someone else. This habit of judgment often comes from a lack of self-acceptance or self-awareness. When we criticize others, we avoid looking at ourselves too closely. Instead of focusing on our own growth or areas where we might be flawed, we divert our attention to the flaws of others. It's a defense mechanism. If we can focus on someone else's mistakes, we can distract ourselves from our own. Take a simple example. You might find yourself judging someone's appearance or lifestyle. Perhaps they're dressed differently from what you think is normal, or they have a habit that you don't understand. It's easy to make a snap judgment about them, to feel that they don't measure up to some unwritten standard. But why do we do this? Often, it's because it's easier to look outward and find fault than to examine our own actions, habits, or insecurities. When we focus on someone else, we avoid confronting our own discomforts or the things that make us feel vulnerable. It's a way of avoiding the harder task of self-reflection. At the same time, when we are judged, it feels deeply personal. We feel as though we are being seen through a narrow lens, reduced to a single aspect of ourselves. When someone judges us, it's as if they're saying that they know who we are, without understanding the full picture of our experiences, struggles, or intentions. This is why being judged can feel so painful. It's not just the criticism itself, but the implication that someone thinks they know us better than we know ourselves. It undermines our sense of individuality and self-worth. Yet, in the act of judging others, we do the same thing. We judge them based on a limited perspective, often failing to see their full story. We might make assumptions about someone's behavior or choices, thinking we understand their motivations, but in reality, we are only seeing a fraction of who they are. This is why judgment can be so toxic. It's based on incomplete information and often leads to misunderstandings. We forget that everyone has their own battles, insecurities, and reasons for behaving the way they do. When we judge someone else, we fail to acknowledge the complexity of their experiences, just as we feel that others fail to acknowledge ours when they judge us. The habit of judging others is also influenced by societal pressures. We live in a world that often encourages comparison. We are constantly exposed to idealized images of success, beauty, and achievement, and these images shape our standards for what's normal or acceptable. When we are surrounded by these standards, it becomes easy to judge others who don't fit the mold. Society rewards conformity and punishes those who stand out, which leads to a cycle of judgment. We internalize these societal norms and then apply them to others, often without even realizing it. We measure people against the same standards that we hold ourselves to, and when they fall short, we criticize them. For example, in the workplace, it's common to compare ourselves to others in terms of productivity, success, or work ethic. When we see someone slacking off or not performing to our expectations, it's easy to pass judgment. We might think, they're not working as hard as I am, or why can't they do things the way I do? But we rarely take the time to consider that the person we're judging might be facing challenges we don't know about, or that their approach might be different but equally valid. We judge them based on our own perspective, ignoring the possibility that their experience is just as complex as ours. It's also important to note that judging others can be a way of protecting ourselves from the fear of being judged. If we can point out someone else's flaws, we create a defense mechanism that shields us from feeling vulnerable. If we are constantly judging others, it may be because we are trying to protect ourselves from the harsh reality of being judged ourselves. It's a way of taking control of a situation that feels unpredictable and uncomfortable. If we judge others, we can convince ourselves that we're in the right, that we are not the ones who need to change or improve. we are able to distance ourselves from the fear of criticism by turning the spotlight on someone else. However, the cycle of judgment creates more problems than it solves. The more we judge others, the more we invite judgment into our own lives. It's a reciprocal process. When we criticize someone, we often create an environment where criticism is normalized, where we become more vulnerable to receiving it in return. And when we are judged, it often leads to feelings of anger or defensiveness, which then perpetuate more judgmental behavior. It's a cycle of negativity that only serves to distance us from each other and from the understanding we all crave. One of the reasons we judge others is because it's easier to criticize than to be criticized. It's a form of self-protection. Criticizing someone else allows us to avoid facing our own flaws or vulnerabilities. When we criticize, we momentarily feel more secure, as if pointing out the weaknesses of others somehow makes us feel stronger. It's a way of avoiding the discomfort of being vulnerable or exposed. It's far easier to highlight someone else's mistakes than to face our own, because criticism often feels like an attack on our character, not just a judgment on our actions. In relationships, this dynamic can cause real harm. If we're constantly judging the other person, nitpicking their actions, or focusing on their shortcomings, we create an environment where they feel defensive and misunderstood. We might even push them away, thinking that we are helping them improve or be better, but in reality, we're only eroding the trust and understanding between us. When we're judged, we often feel small, unworthy, or incapable. If we judge others in the same way, we are creating the same feelings of isolation and insecurity. To break free from this cycle, we need to shift our focus. Instead of judging others, we can try to practice empathy and understanding. Instead of criticizing someone's behavior or choices, we can ask questions and seek to understand their perspective. This doesn't mean we have to agree with everyone or condone harmful behavior, but it does mean that we recognize the complexity of human experiences. When we stop judging others and start listening, we create an environment where we can be more open with each other. We reduce the fear of criticism and replace it with the comfort of understanding. Ultimately, the key to ending the cycle of judgment is self-awareness. When we recognize that we are judging others, we can pause and ask ourselves why. What are we afraid of? What insecurities are we avoiding? When we focus on understanding ourselves first, we become less likely to project our fears and insecurities onto others. By doing so, we not only reduce judgment but also create the space for compassion, understanding, and connection. We all seek the truth, or at least we believe we do. Truth is something that feels important to us, something we think we want to know. We seek it in our relationships, in our work, in the world around us. Truth is supposed to be a guiding force, helping us make better decisions and live authentic lives. But the reality is, while we say we want the truth, we often find ourselves clinging to comforting lies instead. Harsh truths are frequently pushed aside in favor of pleasant illusions. It's easier to accept something that makes us feel good, even if it's not fully accurate, than to face the discomfort that often comes with the truth. The desire for truth is natural. We want to understand the world around us, to make sense of our lives, and to navigate relationships in ways that are grounded in reality. When we know the truth, we feel empowered. It gives us clarity, the ability to make informed decisions, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing where we stand. Truth has the potential to set us free, but at the same time, truth can be uncomfortable, even painful. The truth can challenge our beliefs, expose our flaws, and force us to confront things we'd rather ignore. This discomfort is where the temptation to embrace comforting lies often comes in. Comforting lies, or pleasant illusions, provide a form of escape. They allow us to avoid the difficult or painful realities of life. If we're honest with ourselves, we often prefer the lie that everything is fine, that people won't hurt us, or that things will work out in the end. These illusions offer temporary relief, making us feel safe or secure in the moment. For instance, we might tell ourselves that a relationship is perfect, even though there are obvious signs of dysfunction, because facing the truth about it would mean dealing with the pain of potential loss or change. Or we might convince ourselves that we're doing well in our careers, even if we know deep down that we're stagnating or not living up to our potential, because admitting that would force us to take action and face our fears. It's not that we intentionally deceive ourselves. Rather, it's that we often choose what's easier. Accepting the truth requires effort. It demands that we look honestly at ourselves and our lives, which can be a difficult and sometimes overwhelming task. It asks us to face uncomfortable feelings, to confront reality in its raw form. The harshness of truth often feels unbearable, so we choose the comfort of illusions instead. The lie may not be true, but it feels better, at least for a while. This tendency to favor comforting lies is especially common in our relationships. We might ignore the warning signs of a relationship that isn't healthy or that isn't working, because facing the truth would require us to make hard decisions, like having a difficult conversation or even ending the relationship. It's easier to believe that everything will be okay, that the problems will resolve themselves over time, or that we just need to try harder. But these lies prevent us from taking the necessary steps to create the kind of relationship we truly want or deserve. The longer we cling to the illusion that things are fine, the more difficult it becomes to accept the truth when it eventually surfaces. In our careers, we also tend to embrace comforting lies. We might tell ourselves that we'll eventually get promoted or that we'll find the right job, even though we haven't taken the steps to make it happen. It's easier to imagine that everything will work out on its own, rather than facing the fact that we might need to put in more effort, make some sacrifices, or take risks. The truth that we may not be doing enough, or that we need to change our approach, can be difficult to accept because it implies that we are not in control of our own success. It's easier to live in the comfort of illusion than to face the uncomfortable reality of what needs to be done. The same dynamic plays out in our personal growth. We all want to improve, to become better versions of ourselves. But the truth is that growth requires discomfort. It requires us to acknowledge our weaknesses, confront our fears, and push ourselves beyond our limits. It's much easier to convince ourselves that we're doing well, that we're on the right track, than to admit that we have work to do. The truth might tell us that we need to let go of old habits, face painful memories, or change how we think about ourselves. But instead of accepting that, we tell ourselves that we're doing just fine, even though deep down we know we're avoiding the work that needs to be done. This pattern of seeking comfort over truth can also be seen in the way we view the world. We often cling to the idea that things will improve on their own, that society will get better, that problems will solve themselves without us needing to take action. It's comforting to believe in the illusion that everything will be okay without having to face the harsh truths about the state of the world. But this kind of thinking leads to complacency and inaction. The truth may be that real change requires hard work, difficult conversations, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable realities. But facing these truths would mean acknowledging that we cannot simply sit back and wait for things to improve. Instead, we must take responsibility and take action. The danger of embracing comforting lies is that it prevents us from growing, both as individuals and as a society. When we refuse to face the truth, we prevent ourselves from learning, evolving, and improving. The truth is often difficult to face, but it is necessary for change. It's only by confronting the uncomfortable realities of our lives, our relationships, and the world around us that we can begin to make real progress. So why do we continue to cling to illusions? Part of it is the natural human instinct to avoid pain. No one wants to suffer, and the truth can bring discomfort, pain, and uncertainty. It's easier to believe a lie that offers temporary relief than to face a harsh reality that might require significant effort or change. But the truth, while difficult to face, is what allows us to move forward. It's only when we see things clearly that we can take the necessary steps to improve our lives, our relationships, and our world. Ultimately, we must recognize that while comforting lies may offer temporary peace, they are not a solution. They may shield us from immediate discomfort, but they do not help us grow or create lasting change. The truth, though difficult, is the path to real progress. When we stop avoiding it and begin to accept it, we open ourselves up to the possibility of real transformation, both within ourselves and in the world around us. We all say we want change. We talk about wanting to improve our lives, achieve our goals, or become better versions of ourselves. We envision a future where things are different, where we are different, healthier, happier, more fulfilled. We crave transformation, the kind that makes us feel alive and purposeful. But despite this deep desire for change, we often resist it when it comes. Change, especially the kind that leads to personal growth, can be difficult. It requires effort, discomfort, and sacrifice. So, instead of embracing the very change we long for, we often stick to the familiar suffering we know. It may be painful, but it's comfortable. It's what we've come to expect. And in some strange way, it feels safer than the unknown. Change forces us out of our comfort zones. It challenges us to leave behind old habits, familiar environments, and ways of thinking that have shaped who we are. While we may say we want growth, we often fear the discomfort that accompanies it. Growth isn't easy. It's messy. It involves facing parts of ourselves that we'd rather ignore, the weaknesses, the fears, the insecurities. It requires vulnerability, the kind that can feel risky. When we decide to grow, we have to confront these uncomfortable truths, and that can be painful. So instead of facing that pain, we often cling to the suffering we already know, even if it's not serving us. For example, think about a job you hate but feel stuck in. You might dream of a career change, of doing something that excites you or brings you more satisfaction. You might even talk about making the switch, imagining what it would feel like to wake up in the morning with a sense of purpose. But when it comes time to take action, the fear of change holds you back. The comfort of the familiar, the predictable discomfort of your current job, the steady paycheck, the known struggles, keeps you in place. The unknown of switching careers feels far more terrifying than the daily dissatisfaction you feel. You're familiar with the suffering of your current situation, so you choose to stay there, even though you long for change. This pattern isn't just limited to jobs. It shows up in our relationships, too. We may find ourselves in unhealthy or unfulfilling relationships, yet the idea of leaving or changing them can feel overwhelming. The thought of confronting the issues or ending the relationship can be far more painful than the discomfort of staying in a bad situation. We know the struggles, the arguments, the emotional baggage, and in some twisted way, it becomes a part of our identity. Change, in this case, means uncertainty, and uncertainty is often scarier than the pain of staying the same. We stay because the pain is familiar, even if it doesn't bring us happiness. We do the same thing with our health and well-being. We may know that we need to exercise more, eat better, or take care of our mental health, but the effort it takes to make those changes often feels too much. It requires discipline, time, and sometimes the confrontation of uncomfortable truths about ourselves. The habit of unhealthy eating or a sedentary lifestyle might bring its own suffering, but it's a kind of suffering we're used to. The change that would bring better health requires action and a willingness to face our limitations, our excuses, and our resistance. It's easier to stay stuck in old habits than to take on the hard work of changing them. So we resist growth even when we know it's the key to better health and well-being. This resistance to change is often tied to a fear of failure. We worry that if we try and fail, the discomfort will be even worse than staying in our current situation. It's easier to live with the familiar even if it's not ideal because at least we know what to expect. Change, on the other hand, is unpredictable. We may fail, and that failure can feel like a blow to our self-worth. It's much easier to stay in a bad situation where we don't have to risk failure than to put ourselves out there and face the possibility of falling short. So, we avoid change, even if it means enduring a kind of suffering that leaves us unfulfilled. Another reason we resist change is that it challenges our identity. Who are we if we aren't the person who has been stuck in a job we hate or in a toxic relationship? Who are we if we let go of the familiar struggles and discomforts that have defined us? Our suffering becomes a part of our story, and changing it means rewriting that story. The fear of losing that identity can make us hold on to the old ways, even when they no longer serve us. We resist change because it asks us to let go of who we think we are. It forces us to confront the possibility that we might be more than the struggles we've become accustomed to. Yet, while change can be painful, it is also the path to growth. Change is not an easy process, but it is a necessary one if we are to evolve, improve, and reach our full potential. The discomfort we feel in the face of change is often the sign that we are pushing past our limits and moving into new territory. It is a sign that we are growing, even though it doesn't feel easy. The old version of ourselves, the one that resisted change, has to make way for a new version, one that is stronger, more capable, and more aligned with who we are becoming. But this transformation requires us to step into the unknown and leave behind the familiar suffering that has kept us stuck. The reality is that change is an inevitable part of life. The world around us is constantly changing, and we must change with it if we want to keep up and thrive. But change doesn't have to be something we fear. It can be a powerful tool for growth if we learn to embrace it. Rather than resisting the discomfort that comes with change, we can learn to see it as a sign that we are on the right path. Growth requires discomfort, but that discomfort is temporary. It's the pain that comes before the reward, the transformation that takes us to the next level of our lives. Choosing growth means facing the discomfort of change head-on. It means letting go of the familiar suffering that has kept us stuck and stepping into the unknown with the understanding that the pain of change is far less than the pain of remaining the same. We may be afraid, we may be uncomfortable, but in those moments, we must remind ourselves that the discomfort is temporary and that the growth on the other side is worth it. Change is difficult, but it is the only way to break free from the patterns that hold us back and create a future that is better than the past we've outgrown. We all fear being alone. The thought of being isolated, disconnected from others, can feel like a heavy weight. As humans, we are wired for connection. We crave relationships, companionship, and understanding. Loneliness can feel like a deep emptiness, a void that we often try to avoid at all costs. Yet, paradoxically, we sometimes isolate ourselves. We put up emotional walls, pushing others away when we most need connection. These walls, built out of fear and past experiences, keep people at a distance, leaving us feeling more alone than ever. The fear of being alone often stems from our deep need to be seen and understood. We want to feel like we matter to others, that we are important, and that our existence is validated through relationships. It's natural to want love and affection, to want to feel like we belong. But this fear can become so intense that it leads us to avoid the very thing we need: real, deep connections. We may think that by keeping others at arm's length, we are protecting ourselves from the pain of rejection or disappointment. We build walls as a defense mechanism, believing that if we keep people out, we won't be hurt. But in reality, these walls only create distance, and over time, that distance leads to feelings of isolation and loneliness. Consider a time when you felt the urge to retreat from others, even when you knew that connection was what you needed. Maybe you had a disagreement with a friend or partner, or maybe you were going through a tough time and didn't want to burden anyone with your struggles. Instead of reaching out, you closed yourself off, telling yourself that you'd be fine on your own. At first, it felt like a way to regain control or to protect yourself from vulnerability. But as time passed, the loneliness began to creep in. You realized that your emotional walls, which seemed like a source of strength, were actually making you feel more isolated. The problem is that these walls, while built to protect us, also block out the very things we need for emotional health: support, understanding, and connection. When we keep others at a distance, we prevent ourselves from forming the bonds that could help us navigate difficult emotions. In the long run, isolation can make our fears of loneliness even worse. We may tell ourselves that we're better off alone, that we don't need others, but the truth is that we do. We need connection to thrive, to feel understood, and to experience a sense of belonging. It's easy to build emotional walls when we've been hurt before. Rejection, betrayal, or disappointment can lead us to believe that it's safer to keep people at a distance. The more we experience hurt, the more we convince ourselves that we are better off protecting our hearts. But what starts as self-protection soon becomes a barrier to intimacy and growth. We may find ourselves pushing others away, even when we don't want to. We might become distant or closed off, hiding our true selves because we fear that if we show vulnerability, we'll be hurt again. The problem with this approach is that, while we may avoid hurt in the short term, we also miss out on the rewards of meaningful connection. Love, friendship, and trust require vulnerability. When we allow ourselves to open up to others, we give them the opportunity to see us as we are and to meet us with understanding and care. But when we isolate ourselves, we miss out on these opportunities. We may feel safe in our emotional walls, but that safety comes at the cost of real relationships, leaving us stuck in a cycle of loneliness. This tendency to isolate ourselves can be especially strong when we feel overwhelmed by our emotions. When we're feeling sad, anxious, or frustrated, it's easy to withdraw, to retreat into ourselves and shut others out. We may believe that no one can truly understand what we're going through or that reaching out would burden others. But in reality, keeping our emotions to ourselves only makes things worse. Bottling up our feelings creates a sense of disconnection, and the longer we hold them in, the more difficult it becomes to reach out for support. The walls we build to protect ourselves from emotional pain eventually become the very thing that causes our loneliness. It's important to recognize that isolation isn't always a conscious choice. Sometimes it happens slowly over time as we distance ourselves from others without realizing it. We might stop making plans, cancel social events, or avoid sharing our feelings. We tell ourselves that we don't have time, that we don't need anyone, or that we can handle things on our own. But over time, this pattern of withdrawal can deepen our sense of loneliness, even if we don't consciously acknowledge it. The more we isolate ourselves, the harder it becomes to break out of that cycle. It becomes easier to stay within our emotional walls, convincing ourselves that they provide protection from the world outside. But the truth is that these walls only isolate us further, making it harder to connect with others when we eventually want to. The longer we remain isolated, the more disconnected we feel, and the more difficult it becomes to reach out for the connection we truly need. The fear of being alone and the tendency to isolate ourselves can also be driven by the fear of rejection. We may fear that if we open up to others, they won't understand us, or worse, they'll judge us. The idea of being rejected, especially by someone we care about, can feel like a devastating blow to our sense of self-worth. So, rather than risk that rejection, we keep others at a distance. But in doing so, we deny ourselves the opportunity to experience the kind of love and understanding that can only come through vulnerability. In relationships, this can create a pattern where both people are afraid to be fully open, each retreating into their own emotional shell. Instead of sharing their true feelings, they keep their thoughts and emotions hidden, creating a wall between them. Over time, this wall becomes thicker and harder to break through. What could have been a deep, fulfilling connection becomes a surface-level interaction, where both parties are left feeling misunderstood and disconnected. It's also important to consider the impact of emotional walls on our mental health. Loneliness, even when self-imposed, can contribute to feelings of depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. The longer we isolate ourselves, the more likely we are to struggle with our mental health. Human beings are social creatures, and when we deny ourselves the opportunity for real connection, it can take a toll on our emotional well-being. Our need for companionship, understanding, and validation doesn't go away just because we build walls around ourselves. In fact, the more we try to ignore it, the stronger that need becomes. Breaking down these emotional walls is not easy. It requires a willingness to confront our fears, to face the discomfort of vulnerability, and to trust that others will meet us with compassion. It requires us to let go of the belief that isolation is safer than connection. But the truth is that emotional walls don't protect us. They only keep us from experiencing the very thing we need to heal: human connection. By allowing ourselves to open up, to share our feelings, and to reach out to others, we invite the kind of closeness that can help us overcome loneliness and build meaningful, fulfilling relationships. Ultimately, the fear of being alone is natural, but isolation only makes that fear worse. The emotional walls we build to protect ourselves from rejection or hurt can end up leaving us feeling more disconnected and alone. Instead of pushing people away, we need to find the courage to let them in. By being vulnerable and open, we create the space for real connections that can help us feel seen, understood, and less alone. We all desire security. It's a basic human need. Whether it's the safety of a stable job, the comfort of a steady income, or the assurance that we're protected from life's uncertainties, security gives us peace of mind. It allows us to relax, plan for the future, and focus on what matters without the constant fear of losing everything. Security feels safe, comforting, and predictable. Yet, despite our natural desire for stability, we often find ourselves drawn to risk takers, those who live on the edge and take chances that many of us would never dream of. It's easy to admire these people, to look up to them, and even wish we could be more like them. Safety might be what we want, but danger, when viewed from a distance, has a magnetic pull that we can't easily ignore. The idea of security offers us comfort, but it can also feel boring. The routine of a stable life can seem mundane, especially when we compare it to the thrill and excitement that comes with taking risks. When we choose security, we are choosing the path of least resistance. We are saying no to uncertainty, to the unknown, and to the potential for failure. In many ways, this choice feels responsible, grounded, and wise. But over time, the predictability of a secure life can become monotonous. The excitement of adventure, the feeling of being on the edge, is missing. We begin to yearn for the kind of unpredictability that comes with taking chances, even though deep down we know it's not always the safest route. Look at how we view risk takers. People who take risks, whether they're entrepreneurs, adventurers, or athletes, often captivate our attention. We admire their courage, their willingness to step into the unknown. Risk takers are seen as bold, fearless, and driven. They make things happen, break boundaries, and sometimes achieve incredible feats. They take chances that others wouldn't dare, and in doing so, they push the limits of what is possible. We watch them with a mix of awe and admiration, as if they are living the life we secretly wish we could have. We dream of the freedom they seem to possess, the excitement that follows them wherever they go. But here's the catch. While we are drawn to these risk takers, we are often content to admire them from a distance. We cheer them on, celebrate their achievements, and revel in the stories of their daring exploits. But when it comes time for us to take similar risks, we hesitate. The thought of putting ourselves in their shoes, facing the uncertainty and possible failure, doesn't seem as glamorous when it's our own lives at stake. Danger and uncertainty seem exciting when we are spectators, watching from the sidelines. But when we are the ones who must make the leap, the comfort of security quickly calls us back. It's easy to idolize risk takers because their lives seem filled with possibility. They are living examples of what happens when we throw caution to the wind. But the reality is, most of us aren't willing to take the same risks. The safety of our routines, the predictability of our daily lives, keeps us grounded. We may desire the excitement of a risk-filled life, but we also fear the potential consequences. What if the risk doesn't pay off? What if we lose everything? The consequences of failure, the possibility of regret, weigh heavily on our minds. We may admire risk takers, but we are hesitant to follow their path. At the same time, we live in a world that rewards risk-taking. Entrepreneurs who launch businesses, athletes who push their physical limits, and artists who create groundbreaking work are celebrated, often with great fanfare. We see their success, the accolades they receive, and we want a piece of that. We want the thrill of taking a chance and succeeding. We want the recognition and the excitement that come with living on the edge. But risk-taking also involves the possibility of failure, and that's where most of us draw the line. We want to enjoy the rewards of success, but we aren't always willing to face the challenges and hardships that come with taking risks. The tension between the desire for security and the allure of risk is evident in many areas of our lives. In our careers, for example, we may dream of starting a business or taking on a new challenge that pushes us outside our comfort zone. We may admire those who have the courage to take risks in their careers, thinking that they are living the dream. But when it comes time to make a decision, we often hold back. We choose the safer route, staying in a stable job with a predictable income, because the uncertainty of entrepreneurship or a career change feels too daunting. The risk of failure seems too high, and the comfort of security is too reassuring to give up. In relationships, we might see the excitement and passion of those who take risks in love, those who leap into relationships without hesitation, those who wear their hearts on their sleeves and risk vulnerability. We may envy their ability to live fully, to take chances and experience love without fear. But when it comes to our own relationships, we often play it safe. We avoid vulnerability, afraid that opening up too much will lead to hurt or disappointment. We guard our hearts, unwilling to take the emotional risks that come with real connection, because we fear the pain of rejection or heartbreak. The idea of security in relationships, knowing that we're safe from hurt or disappointment, feels more comfortable than risking the unknown, even though deep down, we know that it's the risks that can lead to the deepest connections. This conflict between security and risk is also present in how we approach our personal lives. Many of us are drawn to adventure, traveling to new places, trying new things, pushing our limits in ways that bring excitement and challenge. But when it comes time to act, we often hesitate. The security of staying home, following familiar routines, and avoiding the unknown feels safer. The excitement of a new adventure is appealing, but the discomfort of the unknown holds us back. We tell ourselves that we'll take risks when the time is right, when we have more money, more time, or more courage. But the truth is, the time may never feel right. And so, the risk of adventure remains just that, a desire unfulfilled. At the core of this tension is the fear of uncertainty. Risk-takers are able to embrace the unknown, to step into situations where the outcome is uncertain, and to face the possibility of failure without letting it stop them. For most of us, though, uncertainty is terrifying. We prefer the stability and predictability of security, even if it means sacrificing the excitement and potential rewards of taking risks. It's a natural human instinct to seek safety, but it can also keep us from experiencing the fullness of life. We want to feel secure, but sometimes that security comes at the cost of the excitement, growth, and fulfillment that come with taking chances. Risk is magnetic because it represents freedom, possibility, and the thrill of the unknown. But the reality of embracing risk requires us to let go of the need for control and certainty. It asks us to step into the unknown with the understanding that failure is part of the journey. As much as we crave security, we are also drawn to the idea that risk can lead to something greater, something more exciting, more meaningful, and more transformative. But it's up to us to decide how much risk we are willing to take, and whether the rewards of uncertainty outweigh the comfort of safety. We all want success. The idea of achieving our goals, being recognized for our talents, and living up to our potential is a powerful motivator. Success promises a sense of accomplishment, fulfillment, and validation. Yet, despite how much we desire it, many of us are deeply afraid of failure. This fear often holds us back from even trying. We avoid taking risks or stepping outside our comfort zones, convinced that failure is something we must avoid at all costs. This fear of failure can be so overwhelming that it prevents us from pursuing the very success we want. At the core of this fear is the belief that failure somehow defines us. We fear that if we fail, we are not good enough, not worthy, or not capable. This belief is deeply rooted in the idea that our worth is tied to our achievements. The thought of failing means we have not met expectations, either our own or others. Failure, then, becomes a reflection of our inadequacy. It is easier to avoid trying than to risk the possibility of failing and exposing what we perceive as our weaknesses. So, we hold ourselves back, staying in the safety of familiar routines, avoiding challenges that might lead to failure, even if they could bring us closer to the success we desire. One of the most insidious ways this fear of failure manifests is through perfectionism. Perfectionism is often seen as a desire to do things well, to achieve the highest standards. On the surface, it may appear admirable. After all, who doesn't want to do their best? But perfectionism is often a cover for insecurity. It is the fear that if we don't do something perfectly, we will be judged or deemed inadequate. Perfectionism keeps us from taking risks because it creates an impossible standard to live up to. The fear of not meeting this standard paralyzes us, making it hard to even begin. Take, for example, someone who wants to start a business. They may have a great idea and the ambition to see it through, but the fear of failure prevents them from taking the first step. They tell themselves they need to have everything figured out: perfect plans, flawless marketing strategies, a perfect product. They delay starting because they are afraid of not getting it right, of making mistakes that will lead to failure. The more they focus on perfecting the details, the more they distance themselves from taking any action at all. The desire for perfection becomes a trap that keeps them from even trying, and the fear of failure keeps them stuck. Perfectionism shows up in many areas of life. It's in the person who is afraid to ask for help because they feel they should be able to do everything on their own. It's in the student who waits until the last minute to start studying because they are terrified of getting anything less than an A. It's in the employee who constantly overworks themselves trying to impress others and avoid criticism, even when the work is already good enough. Perfectionism convinces us that only flawless work is acceptable, and that any mistake is a sign of failure. As a result, we can spend hours, days, or even weeks trying to get everything just right, all while avoiding the real task at hand: taking action. This fear of failure and the drive for perfection are deeply intertwined. We may think we want to succeed, but the idea of failure feels so threatening that we avoid taking the necessary steps to reach our goals. We worry that if we don't get it perfect, we will be judged, and we believe that failure is the ultimate form of judgment. But the truth is, failure is an essential part of success. It's through failure that we learn, grow, and improve. Every successful person has failed at some point. The difference is that they didn't let failure stop them. Instead, they used it as a learning opportunity, a chance to adjust, try again, and ultimately succeed. Yet, when we are so focused on avoiding failure, we miss out on the valuable lessons it provides. We become trapped in a cycle where we do everything we can to avoid failure, but in doing so, we avoid trying new things, taking risks, and pushing ourselves towards success. This fear of failure can leave us stagnant, never progressing or moving forward, because we are too afraid to fail. Perfectionism, driven by this fear, becomes a barrier to growth, keeps us stuck in the pursuit of an ideal that doesn't exist. No matter how much we strive for perfection, there will always be something more to improve, something else to get right. And because perfection is unattainable, we are left constantly chasing it, without ever feeling satisfied or accomplished. This creates a feeling of never being good enough, no matter how hard we try. The fear of failure becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because we are so afraid of failing, we don't take action, and because we don't take action, we never succeed. This cycle can also feed into our insecurities. When we strive for perfection, we often do so because we believe that our value is tied to our achievements. If we don't succeed, we fear that we will be seen as inadequate or unworthy. This belief stems from a lack of self-acceptance. We think that we need to be perfect to be loved, respected, or admired, and that anything less than perfection means we are flawed. The irony is that perfectionism itself is born out of insecurity. We try to achieve perfection because we believe we aren't enough as we are, but the pursuit of perfection only amplifies our insecurities. The constant fear of failure and the desire for perfection also take a toll on our mental health. The stress and pressure to always perform at the highest level can lead to burnout, anxiety, and depression. When we hold ourselves to unrealistic standards, we set ourselves up for disappointment and frustration. We may find ourselves feeling overwhelmed, unmotivated, or even paralyzed by the weight of our own expectations. This fear of failure and perfectionism can erode our confidence, making it harder to take risks and pursue the things we truly want. Breaking free from the grip of perfectionism requires a shift in perspective. We need to recognize that failure is not something to be feared, but something to embrace. It's through failure that we learn, grow, and become better versions of ourselves. Rather than avoiding failure, we should see it as a necessary part of the journey. Every step we take, whether it leads to success or failure, is a step forward. We must also learn to separate our self-worth from our achievements. Our value is not determined by how perfect we are or how successful we become. It is inherent in who we are, flaws and all. To truly succeed, we must be willing to try, to fail, and to try again. We must be willing to step outside of our comfort zones, take risks, and make mistakes. Success isn't about being perfect. It's about perseverance, learning from failure, and continuing to move forward, even when things don't go as planned. By letting go of perfectionism and embracing failure as part of the process, we free ourselves to take the risks necessary for real success. We all want to be remembered. There's something deeply ingrained in us that seeks to leave a mark, to have our lives mean something, to be acknowledged for the impact we've made. Whether it's through the work we do, the relationships we build, or the changes we bring about, we long to be remembered after we're gone. Legacy gives us a sense of purpose and reassurance. It's comforting to think that the things we do today will be remembered by others in the future, that our lives will have mattered in some way. Yet, as much as we crave this kind of recognition, we also fear being truly seen. The idea of allowing others to see us fully, to reveal who we truly are, can feel deeply uncomfortable. Vulnerability, the very thing that opens the door to genuine connection and lasting legacy, feels dangerous. The tension between wanting to be remembered and fearing vulnerability runs deep. On one hand, we want to leave something behind, a legacy that speaks to who we are, what we've accomplished, and the lives we've touched. We hope that others will remember us fondly, that our contributions will have lasting value. This desire can drive us to work hard, to achieve, and to make a difference. We may even seek out ways to make our mark in the world, whether through our careers, creative pursuits, or acts of service. The idea of being remembered is powerful because it connects us to something larger than ourselves. It suggests that our existence matters, that our time on earth hasn't been in vain. But then there's the other side, the fear of being seen for who we really are. Vulnerability means exposing ourselves in ways that are uncomfortable and unpredictable. When we open ourselves up to others, we risk judgment, rejection, and misunderstanding. It's easier to hide behind a mask, to present a version of ourselves that feels safe and controlled. We fear that if others see us fully, our flaws, our struggles, our imperfections, they might not like what they see. We fear being judged, dismissed, or ignored. This fear can stop us from truly sharing ourselves with others, from being open and authentic. We hide our true selves to protect ourselves from the pain of potential rejection. The paradox is that, in order to build a lasting legacy, we must allow ourselves to be vulnerable. It's through vulnerability that we connect with others in meaningful ways. When we allow ourselves to be seen, we invite others to see us as we are, not just our accomplishments or achievements, but our humanity. It's easy to think that legacy is about what we've done, what we've built, or how much we've gained in life. But in reality, legacy is also about how we've made others feel, the relationships we've fostered, and the connections we've created. These things can only happen when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Take a moment to think about someone who has had a lasting impact on your life. Perhaps it was a mentor, a friend, or a family member. What made them memorable? It likely wasn't just their accomplishments or their external success. It was their ability to be open, to share their experiences, to connect with you on a deeper level. It was their vulnerability. Whether they shared their struggles, their fears, or their true thoughts, that made them human to you. In turn, that vulnerability created a bond, a connection that went beyond the surface and left a lasting impression. It's not the walls we build around ourselves that leave a legacy. It's the openness, the willingness to be seen, that creates something meaningful. But even knowing this, we still hesitate to embrace vulnerability. We might convince ourselves that we don't need to expose ourselves, that we can build a legacy by simply being successful, by accumulating achievements and accolades. But this approach often leads to loneliness and disconnection. Without vulnerability, we miss out on the deeper connections that make life worth living. A legacy built only on external success is often shallow, incomplete, and disconnected from the truth of who we are. We can achieve all we want in life, but without truly connecting with others, we risk being forgotten for the wrong reasons, because we never allowed anyone to really know us. Consider someone you admire, a historical figure, a famous artist, or even a public figure. What is it about them that stands out? Often, it's not just their success that makes them memorable, but the way they allowed themselves to be open, to share their authentic selves with the world. It's their vulnerability, the way they showed up as who they truly were, that made them relatable and impactful. In this sense, vulnerability becomes a tool for creating a legacy that matters. It's not about being perfect or hiding our flaws, but about being real and authentic in everything we do. When we embrace vulnerability, we invite others to do the same, and that creates a ripple effect, a connection that lasts long after we're gone. The fear of being truly seen can also come from past experiences of rejection or hurt. Many of us have been taught to guard our feelings, to protect our hearts, and to keep certain parts of ourselves hidden to avoid pain. We've learned that being vulnerable can lead to disappointment or even betrayal. As a result, we build emotional walls to protect ourselves. But these walls also prevent us from experiencing the richness of deep, authentic relationships. They keep others at a distance, and while that might feel safe in the short term, it leads to isolation and loneliness in the long run. Legacy is about more than just what we leave behind. It's also about how we engage with others while we're here. The relationships we build, the moments we share, and the ways in which we connect with people are what truly define our legacy. But in order to build these connections, we have to be willing to let others see us. Not just the polished, perfected version of ourselves, but the messy, imperfect, and vulnerable parts too. It's in these moments of vulnerability that we truly show up for others, and it's in these moments that we create the kind of legacy that matters. Think about a time when you allowed yourself to be vulnerable with someone else. Maybe it was a conversation in which you shared something personal, or a moment when you opened up about a struggle you were facing. In that moment, you likely felt both exposed and connected. You may have feared judgment or rejection, but the vulnerability allowed for a deeper connection and understanding. That is where the power of legacy lies. Through vulnerability, we build relationships that transcend the surface-level interactions we often engage in. This does not mean that vulnerability is easy or without risk. It can be terrifying to open ourselves up to others, to share our true thoughts and feelings. But the rewards of vulnerability far outweigh the risks. Vulnerability allows us to create meaningful connections, to be seen for who we truly are, and to build the kind of legacy that reflects the truth of our lives. It is through being vulnerable that we become real, and it is through being real that we leave the kind of impact that lasts. The fear of being seen and the desire for legacy are not opposites. They are interconnected. Our legacy depends on how much we are willing to let others see us, to let them into our lives and our hearts. It's through vulnerability that we invite others to connect with us, and through that connection, we create the lasting impact we seek. The question is not whether we want a legacy, it's whether we are willing to let go of the fear of being truly seen in order to build one. We often pride ourselves on being rational, on having the ability to think critically, to make decisions based on logic and reason. In many areas of life, we rely on our intellect to guide us, whether in the workplace, in our personal goals, or in solving problems. Logic helps us make sense of the world, evaluate options, and make decisions that appear well thought out. But beneath this veneer of reason, we are often driven by emotion. Our feelings, not our logic, can shape the way we think, influence the decisions we make, and even determine the course of our actions. Logic often serves our emotions, not the other way around. The idea that we are rational beings is an appealing one. It gives us the sense that we are in control of our decisions, that we can weigh the facts, look at the evidence, and come to a reasonable conclusion. But in practice, emotion often takes the lead. When we are faced with a decision, our emotional responses tend to guide our thinking more than we realize. How we feel about a situation often influences the way we interpret facts, the options we consider, and the choices we make. Our emotions can cloud our judgment, leading us to make decisions that don't always align with logic or reason. Think about a time when you've made a decision based on emotion, even though it didn't make logical sense. Perhaps it was a purchase, something you bought on impulse because it made you feel good in the moment, even though you knew it wasn't a practical choice. Or maybe it was a relationship decision, where emotions like love, guilt, or fear led you to act in a way that didn't align with your rational judgment. In these moments, emotion takes the driver's seat, and logic is left to play catch-up. We justify our decisions afterward, telling ourselves that it felt right or that we needed to follow our heart, even if it doesn't make sense when examined from a purely logical standpoint. Emotions, however, are not inherently bad or irrational. They are a vital part of our human experience, helping us navigate the world and connect with others. Emotions can be powerful guides, providing us with the motivation and drive to act. They help us form connections, build relationships, and find meaning in life. The issue arises not when we feel emotions, but when we allow those emotions to dominate our decision-making process, overriding reason and logic. This emotional influence on decision-making can be seen in many areas of life. For example, in our relationships, emotions often drive us more than logic does. We might stay in a relationship that isn't healthy because of the emotional attachment we have to the person, despite knowing that the relationship isn't serving us in the long term. Or we might make decisions based on fear of rejection, fear of loneliness, that lead us to act in ways that aren't logical or in our best interest. In these moments, our emotions take center stage, and logic is left to justify decisions that were made primarily based on how we feel. The same emotional influence plays out in our careers. Many people stay in jobs that make them unhappy, either because of fear of change or because they've become emotionally attached to their role or coworkers. Logic might tell them that it's time to move on, that there are better opportunities, or that they need a change for their mental health. But the emotional attachment to the familiar, the fear of the unknown, or the need for validation keeps them stuck. In these situations, logic serves emotion by providing a justification for staying put, even when deep down, they know they should be moving forward. Another area where emotion drives our logic is in how we form opinions or beliefs. We all have biases, emotional attachments to certain viewpoints or ideas. These biases influence how we interpret information, often leading us to accept facts that align with our feelings and reject those that contradict them. We might seek out information that confirms what we already believe and dismiss information that challenges our emotions. This is known as confirmation bias, and it's a perfect example of how our emotions shape the way we process logic. Instead of allowing logic to guide our beliefs, we allow our emotions to dictate which facts we accept and which we ignore. Even in moments of conflict, logic often takes a backseat to emotion. When we feel hurt, angry, or misunderstood, our emotional reactions can cloud our judgment. We may say things we don't mean or make decisions that escalate the situation, all because our emotions are in control. In these situations, logic might tell us that calm, thoughtful communication is the best way to resolve the issue. But emotion, whether it's frustration, pride, or fear, often pushes us to act impulsively, to lash out, or to retreat. Afterward, we might look back and recognize that our emotional response didn't help the situation at all, but in the heat of the moment, it was impossible to think clearly. The idea that emotion often guides logic might seem counterintuitive. After all, we pride ourselves on being logical, on making decisions that are based on reason rather than feeling. But the truth is that our emotions are a fundamental part of who we are. They influence nearly every aspect of our lives, from how we interact with others to how we make decisions. And while logic and reason are essential tools, they are often working in service of our emotions. When we make a decision, logic provides the framework for understanding the consequences, but emotion is what drives us to act. This doesn't mean that we should discard logic or reason. Far from it. Logic is still an essential tool for making sound decisions, for solving problems, and for navigating complex situations. But we must acknowledge that it's not always the first thing that guides us. Our emotions are powerful and they often take the lead. The key is not to ignore our feelings, but to recognize when they are driving us in ways that might not serve us. We can use logic to check our emotional impulses, to evaluate whether our feelings are leading us to make the best decisions, and to guide us toward more thoughtful, deliberate choices. In moments where emotion threatens to override logic, it can be helpful to pause and reflect. Before making a decision, take a step back and ask yourself if your feelings are driving your actions. Are you acting out of fear, anger, or attachment? Are your emotions clouding your judgment? By taking a moment to reflect, you give yourself the opportunity to make a decision that aligns more with your true intentions and goals, rather than one that is dictated by temporary emotional impulses. Ultimately, we are not purely rational beings, nor are we purely emotional. We are complex creatures, shaped by both our feelings and our ability to think critically. Logic and emotion are not opposites, but complementary forces. By acknowledging the role that emotion plays in our decisions and allowing logic to serve as a check on those emotions, we can make more balanced, thoughtful choices. It's about finding harmony between the two, using both our hearts and our minds to navigate life in a way that feels authentic and true to who we are. We all long for simplicity. In a world full of distractions, responsibilities, and constant noise, simplicity feels like a breath of fresh air. We yearn for clear, easy solutions to our problems, for straightforward paths toward our goals, and for relationships that are uncomplicated and fulfilling. Simplicity gives us a sense of peace. It helps us focus on what matters, cuts through the noise, and allows us to breathe without feeling overwhelmed. Yet, Despite this longing for simplicity, we often find ourselves complicating everything: our relationships, our goals, and even our decisions. It's as if we can't help but overthink, overanalyze, and create complexity where it doesn't need to exist. When it comes to relationships, the desire for simplicity is clear. We want connections that are honest, genuine, and straightforward. We want to feel seen, heard, and valued by the people we care about. But despite these basic desires, we often complicate our relationships. We overthink every interaction, wonder about the motives behind every word or action, and create unnecessary drama where there shouldn't be any. Instead of focusing on the simple things like spending quality time together or being open and honest, we allow small issues to grow into bigger problems because we hesitate to address them directly. We second-guess ourselves, trying to interpret every look, every word, every gesture, as if everything holds a hidden meaning. This fear of not fully understanding the other person leads us to question ourselves and the relationship, and in the end, we make things more complicated than they need to be. Think about a situation in a romantic relationship where communication could have been simple, but wasn't. Maybe you've had a small disagreement that was left unresolved. Instead of addressing it directly, you start to question everything. Did they mean what they said? Why haven't they texted back? What does this mean for the future? Instead of having an open conversation, you end up trapped in your own thoughts, making assumptions and complicating the situation. When you finally do talk, you realize that the problem wasn't as big as you thought, and the misunderstanding could have been cleared up much earlier. But by letting fear, doubt, and insecurity take over, you created a mountain out of a molehill. The same happens in friendships. We may worry about how we're perceived, overanalyze the other person's behavior, or wonder whether we've said or done something wrong. These worries often lead us to pull back or act in ways that don't reflect our true feelings, creating tension where none existed before. The desire for simplicity in friendships is easy to recognize. We want trust, support, and honesty. But we often complicate things by overthinking, holding back, or trying to manage how we're perceived rather than just being ourselves. This need to complicate relationships isn't limited to romantic or platonic connections. It shows up in family dynamics, work relationships, and even casual acquaintances. When we stop communicating openly and let our fears, insecurities, and assumptions take over, we turn something that could be simple into something tangled and difficult. We want the simplicity of mutual understanding and trust, but we often get lost in the complexity of our own thoughts and emotions, which make everything harder than it needs to be. When it comes to our goals, we also crave simplicity, but we tend to complicate them. We dream of success, fulfillment, and achievement, but we often create complicated plans, overthink every detail, and get caught up in making things perfect. Instead of focusing on the most direct path, we worry about every possible obstacle, every possible failure, and every step along the way. We may set goals that are so ambitious, so complex, that they overwhelm us before we even begin. Instead of starting with small, manageable steps, we try to plan everything out in perfect detail, only to become paralyzed by the fear of not getting everything right. For example, imagine you want to start a new project or business. You may begin with a simple idea, but soon enough you're caught in a web of complications. You worry about every possible failure, every small detail. What if your marketing strategy isn't right? What if you don't have the right resources? What if people don't respond to your idea? This fear of making mistakes leads you to overcomplicate your plan, adding layers of complexity that only serve to delay action. Instead of taking the first step, you become paralyzed by the details, waiting for everything to be perfect. The simple goal of starting something new turns into a series of overwhelming tasks, and you end up stuck in a cycle of overthinking and inaction. We also complicate our goals by setting too many of them. We may have a dozen different things we want to achieve, from improving our health and career to learning new skills and traveling the world. In theory, all of these goals seem good, but in practice, we spread ourselves too thin. We try to focus on everything at once, dividing our attention between multiple things, and as a result, we don't make meaningful progress in any one area. We end up feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, and frustrated, wondering why we can't seem to achieve anything. The simplicity of focusing on one goal, one task at a time, gets lost in a sea of competing priorities. In reality, success doesn't require us to overcomplicate our goals. It requires focus, clarity, and consistent effort. The most successful people are often those who simplify their goals, breaking them down into manageable steps and focusing on one thing at a time. They don't get bogged down by every possible obstacle or overanalyze every decision. They take action, learn from their mistakes, and adjust as they go. By simplifying their approach, they make progress without getting stuck in the complexity of perfectionism or fear of failure. The same tendency to complicate things shows up when it comes to decisions. We all face decisions every day, from small choices like what to eat for lunch to larger, life-changing decisions like where to live or whether to take a new job. We all want to make the right choice, and so we overthink every possibility. We worry about every outcome, every risk, and every potential consequence. Instead of trusting ourselves and making a decision based on what feels right, we weigh every option, consider every angle, and second-guess ourselves at every turn. This overthinking leads to decision paralysis, where we get stuck in the process of making the decision rather than actually making it. Take, for example, the decision to move to a new city for a job opportunity. The excitement of the new possibility is quickly overshadowed by the fear of making the wrong choice. What if the new city isn't as great as I think? What if I don't fit in? What if the job doesn't live up to expectations? The desire for a clear, simple decision gets lost in a maze of questions and what-ifs. Instead of trusting the simple truth that the opportunity might be good for your growth and future, you get stuck in a web of complications that leave you unsure about whether to go or stay. The fear of making the wrong decision often leads us to complicate things. We overanalyze, weigh every possible option, and look for guarantees that don't exist. We forget that life doesn't always work in absolutes. There will always be unknowns, and there is no perfect decision. Sometimes, the best course of action is simply to make a choice, learn from it, and adjust along the way. By overcomplicating decisions, we delay progress and create unnecessary stress. We want clarity, but instead, we create confusion by seeking perfection. At the core of our tendency to complicate everything is the fear of failure, rejection, or making the wrong choice. We seek simplicity, but we often add complexity in an attempt to control the outcome. We want relationships that are easy, goals that are clear, and decisions that lead to success, but we often find ourselves tangled in the uncertainty that comes with trying to manage every possibility. The key is to recognize when we're overcomplicating things and to step back, simplifying our approach to allow room for growth and progress. Ultimately, we can strive for simplicity in our relationships, goals, and decisions. It's about trusting ourselves and embracing the straightforward path, even when the temptation to overthink or complicate things arises. By focusing on the essentials, staying present, and trusting the process, we can make life feel less overwhelming and more fulfilling. We all want fairness. It's a principle that guides many of our decisions and actions. We want to be treated justly, to know that what we receive is based on what we deserve. We seek fairness in our relationships, in the workplace, and in society. But often, our sense of fairness is clouded by our own self-interest. We might say we want justice, but our actions reveal that we are driven by what benefits us the most. The idea of fairness becomes subjective, changing depending on who stands to gain or lose. Self-interest is a powerful force in all of us. It's natural to want to protect and advance our own well-being. At its core, self-interest is about looking out for ourselves, ensuring that we get what we need to survive and thrive. It's built into our instincts. However, when we let self-interest take over, it can cloud our judgment and influence how we see fairness. We begin to view situations not in terms of what is just or right, but in terms of what benefits us the most. Our version of fairness becomes less about equity and more about what works in our favor. This becomes particularly clear when we observe how we treat others. For example, in a workplace, we may advocate for a promotion for ourselves, arguing that we've earned it through hard work and dedication. However, if someone else, who is equally deserving, is up for the same position, we might begin to question their qualifications or subtly undermine their efforts. Our desire for fairness becomes skewed by our personal ambition. We may still believe in justice, but our actions show that we're more concerned with securing our own position than with ensuring everyone is treated equally. In relationships, too, fairness often depends on what we stand to gain. Imagine a situation where you and a friend both face difficult circumstances. You might tell them that they should be open and honest with you about their feelings, yet when it's your turn to share something vulnerable, you might hold back or avoid the conversation altogether. You may expect your friend to be understanding and supportive, but you aren't willing to extend the same openness or empathy to them. In this case, your sense of fairness is based on your own needs and comfort, not on treating the other person with the same level of honesty and respect that you expect. Even in the larger context of society, justice is often shaped by who benefits. We see this in the legal system, where the wealthy and powerful often have better access to resources that help them win cases. It's not that the system is entirely unfair, but it often operates in a way that favors those with the means to navigate it. In some cases, laws that are meant to protect everyone can end up disproportionately benefiting certain groups over others, whether through loopholes, biases, or the ability to hire better legal representation. This creates a system where justice isn't always about what's fair, but about what can be achieved for those who have more power, influence, or money. The same dynamic plays out in politics. Policies that claim to be in the interest of justice and fairness often end up serving the interests of the wealthy or powerful. Tax laws, for example, are designed to ensure that everyone pays their fair share, but often, the wealthy find ways to avoid paying taxes, exploiting loopholes that aren't available to ordinary people. When the rich are able to pay a smaller percentage of their income in taxes than the middle class or working poor, the system becomes less about fairness and more about preserving the advantages of those already in power. We may still call it justice, but the reality is that justice often depends on who has the means to influence the system. This is not to say that all actions driven by self-interest are inherently bad. Self-interest is necessary for survival and growth. We make decisions based on what's best for us and those we care about. However, when self-interest begins to dominate, it can blind us to the needs and rights of others. The more we act out of self-interest, the more likely we are to see fairness as something that benefits us, rather than something that treats all parties equally. We justify our actions by telling ourselves that we deserve more or that our needs are more urgent, but in doing so, we ignore the broader picture of what fairness truly means. Consider the example of a group project. In an ideal world, fairness would mean that every member of the group contributes equally, and the workload is shared in a way that reflects each person's strengths and abilities. However, when people act out of self-interest, the distribution of work becomes skewed. One person might take on more work than others because they feel they have the skills or knowledge to do so, while another person might contribute less because they're more focused on their own priorities. The fairness of the project becomes less about an equal division of work and more about what serves the individual. Some may feel justified in taking on more or doing less based on their perceived importance or expertise, but the result is a project that lacks true fairness. This desire to act out of self-interest also plays out in the way we prioritize our time and resources. When we choose how to spend our money, we often make decisions based on what will bring us the most benefit. We may donate to charity, for example, but choose organizations that reflect our personal values or interests rather than ones that need help the most. Similarly, we may spend our time on activities that are enjoyable or rewarding for us, even if we know that others could use our support or attention. Our actions may still reflect a desire to help, but they are often filtered through our own needs and desires. Even in our personal lives, fairness can become distorted by self-interest. If a friend or loved one asks for help, we might feel inclined to offer it, but only if it doesn't inconvenience us too much. We might say that we're being fair, that we're helping out, but in reality, we're only willing to help to the extent that it serves our own needs. If helping them means sacrificing our own time, energy, or comfort, we might hesitate, finding reasons not to get involved. The fairness of the situation becomes secondary to our own convenience or sense of what we deserve. In the end, our desire for fairness is often at odds with our natural tendency to act out of self-interest. It's a struggle between wanting to do what's right, what's just, and wanting to protect and advance ourselves. The challenge is learning how to navigate this tension, to recognize when our self-interest is clouding our judgment of fairness, and to act in ways that take the needs of others into account. Fairness should not be determined by who benefits the most, but by ensuring that everyone is treated equitably, regardless of their status or power. True justice is about putting aside our personal gain and considering the needs and rights of others, even when it's not the most convenient or beneficial option for ourselves. We all want progress. The idea of moving forward, improving, and achieving something greater is deeply ingrained in us. Whether it's through technology, personal growth, or societal change, we strive for a future that's better than the past. Progress offers us hope, a sense that we can overcome obstacles and make things better for ourselves and others. However, even as we look to the future, we often find ourselves glorifying the past. Nostalgia has a powerful hold on us, making the old seem golden, even when it wasn't. We remember the past with rose-colored glasses, forgetting the struggles and imperfections that were once part of it. This tendency to idealize the past, while we claim to value progress, creates a contradiction in how we view our lives and the world around us. Nostalgia has a way of filtering our memories, making them seem simpler, happier, or more meaningful than they really were. We look back at certain times, childhood, past relationships, or earlier periods in history, and remember them with fondness, forgetting the challenges or frustrations that were present at the time. A perfect example is the way we often think about the past as a time of greater community or connection. We may look back and say, things were better then, when in reality, those times might have been full of their own struggles, misunderstandings, and divisions. It's not that the past didn't have value. It's that our memories tend to smooth over the difficulties, focusing only on what felt good or comforting. Take, for instance, the way we view childhood. Many people look back and remember it as a time of innocence and happiness. We think about summers spent outdoors, carefree days with friends, and the simple pleasures of life. But for many, childhood was also a time of confusion, loneliness, or struggle. We forget the difficult moments, the times we felt left out, the challenges at school, the family problems we may have faced. These memories are often pushed to the back of our minds, while the positive moments are highlighted. As adults, we may look back on our childhood with longing, wishing we could return to a time that, in reality, wasn't as perfect as we remember. Nostalgia creates a version of the past that feels comforting, even if it wasn't all that we idealize. Similarly, we often glorify past relationships. We think about the relationships we had when we were younger, the friends we once had, or past loves, and remember them as simpler times. We forget the arguments, the misunderstandings, or the fact that we weren't always as happy as we recall. The past relationship may not have been perfect, but nostalgia makes it seem like it was. We might say to ourselves, "That was the best time of my life," when in reality, it was just one period among many, full of its own challenges and difficulties. Yet, when we focus on the positive memories and block out the negatives, we build up the past into something idealized. This same glorification of the past happens on a societal level. We look back at certain historical periods with reverence, wishing we could return to a time when things seemed simpler, more stable, or more orderly. For example, people often romanticize the good old days of past decades, when life seemed less complicated, or when there was more unity. The 1950s in many countries are often remembered as a time of prosperity and safety. Yet, that era was also marked by inequality, social injustice, and limited opportunities for many groups of people. We forget the struggles of marginalized communities, the lack of freedom, and the restrictions people faced during those times. The idealization of past eras overlooks the complexities and inequalities of those periods, focusing only on the aspects that seem comforting or nostalgic. When we glorify the past, we are often ignoring the progress that has been made since then. We focus on the comfort of what we know or remember, rather than embracing the improvements that have come with time. For instance, we may romanticize a time when technology wasn't as advanced, when people didn't rely on digital devices or constant connectivity. While it might seem appealing to think about life without smartphones and the constant barrage of information, we forget the limitations that existed in those times, how people were more isolated, how communication was slower, and how many things that are now possible weren't even dreamed of back then. The progress we've made in technology, medicine, and social awareness has opened up new possibilities for all of us. Yet we sometimes long for a simpler time, ignoring the benefits of the present. In personal growth, we also fall into the trap of idealizing the past. We might think about a time when we were more carefree, more confident, or more in control of our lives. We look back on our younger selves and wish we could recapture the energy, the optimism, or the sense of adventure we once had. But when we focus on how great the past seemed, we forget the struggles we faced during those times, the doubts we had, the insecurities we overcame, and the challenges we pushed through. Progress and growth often come from overcoming difficulties, and while we might wish for a time when things were easier, we're overlooking how much we've learned and grown along the way. The truth is, the past wasn't always as golden as we remember it. It had its own set of challenges, complexities, and imperfections. And while it's natural to feel nostalgic, we must also recognize that the idealized version of the past can prevent us from fully appreciating the progress we've made. When we glorify the past, we diminish the value of the present and fail to see the opportunities that lie ahead. By holding on to the comforting idea that things were better back then, we miss out on the chance to shape the future in a way that moves us forward. Progress requires us to let go of the past, to stop holding it up as a standard against which everything is measured. It means accepting that the past was not perfect, that it was full of both joys and struggles, and that we've made strides since then. This doesn't mean we should forget the past or dismiss it entirely. It means acknowledging its complexities and using it as a foundation for growth, not as a reason to cling to outdated ideals. By doing so, we can move forward with a clearer understanding of how far we've come and how much further we can go. When we stop glorifying the past, we can begin to embrace the present and future with more openness. We can see the progress we've made, not just in the world around us, but in our own lives. We don't need to look back to feel fulfilled or to find meaning. The possibilities that lie ahead are just as valuable, if not more so, than what has already been. The desire for progress can be hindered by nostalgia, but when we let go of the idealized past, we allow ourselves the freedom to create something even better. We all want to be better, whether it's in our careers, our relationships, or our personal growth. We strive to improve. We want to be more successful, more understanding, more capable. Improvement is a constant goal. It pushes us to grow, to challenge ourselves, and to reach new heights. But there's one thing that often holds us back from truly improving: our reluctance to admit that we're flawed. It's hard to face our weaknesses, our mistakes, and the parts of ourselves that need work. Acknowledging our flaws requires humility, and humility can be difficult. It hurts our ego, and our ego is something we protect fiercely. It tells us that we're fine just as we are, that we don't need to change, that we've got it figured out. But improvement starts with recognizing that we aren't perfect, and that process of admitting flaws, though painful, is the very first step toward growth. The idea of self-improvement is appealing. We look at successful people, at those who seem to have it all together, and we admire their drive, their discipline, and their ability to overcome challenges. We think to ourselves, I want to be like that. I want to be better. But in order to improve, we must first acknowledge where we are lacking. This is where the trouble begins. To truly grow, we need to face the uncomfortable truth that we are not as good as we'd like to be. We are flawed. We make mistakes. We have areas in our lives that need attention, improvement, and change. Yet, despite this truth, we resist admitting it. We tend to hide our flaws, even from ourselves. It's easier to pretend that we have it all together, that we're doing everything right, than to admit that there are things we need to work on. Admitting our flaws feels like admitting weakness. It feels like admitting that we aren't as capable or as strong as we'd like to believe. Our ego tells us that we should be confident, that we should project an image of success and competence. It convinces us that vulnerability, particularly the vulnerability of admitting we're not perfect, is a sign of failure. So we avoid it, we deflect, we rationalize. We tell ourselves that there's no need to change, that we're fine the way we are. And in doing so, we prevent ourselves from improving. The fear of facing our flaws can be particularly strong in our professional lives. At work, we often want to appear competent, confident, and in control. We avoid admitting that we don't know something or that we're struggling with a task. Instead, We might overcompensate by pretending to know more than we do or by pushing ourselves to complete tasks at the expense of quality. The pressure to maintain a perfect image can prevent us from seeking help or asking questions when we need guidance. We might even resist feedback from others because it forces us to confront areas where we could improve. But without that feedback, without that humility to accept that we are not perfect, we remain stagnant. We can't grow or progress if we're unwilling to face the areas that need attention. The same resistance to humility plays out in our personal lives. In relationships, we may struggle to admit when we're wrong. We might hold onto our pride, refusing to apologize or take responsibility for our mistakes. It's difficult to admit that we've hurt someone, especially if doing so feels like an attack on our character. But when we refuse to acknowledge our flaws, we prevent our relationships from growing. We build walls instead of bridges. Humility in relationships is about being open, admitting when we've made a mistake, and showing that we're willing to learn and grow. But that requires the painful work of letting go of our ego, of acknowledging that we are not perfect and that we have room to improve. Even when we seek personal growth, we resist humility. We want to be better versions of ourselves, but when it comes time to look at our own flaws, we shy away. We don't want to face the parts of ourselves that need work. It's easier to ignore those weaknesses or to pretend they don't exist than to confront them head-on. This reluctance can show up in the smallest of actions. Perhaps you've had a moment when you knew you could have been kinder to someone, or you recognized a behavior that was holding you back, but instead of acknowledging it, you let it slide. The discomfort of admitting that you could do better leads you to avoid it. But personal growth doesn't happen unless we are willing to look inward, to see the places where we fall short, and to take steps to improve. It's important to recognize that humility isn't about self-criticism or self-doubt. It's not about beating ourselves up for every mistake or shortcoming. Humility is about being honest with ourselves. It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers, that we are not perfect, and that we have room to grow. This recognition isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. It takes courage to face our flaws, to accept that we are not where we want to be, and to commit to becoming better. Without this humility, we can't truly improve. Our ego, which tells us that we are already good enough, keeps us stuck in the same patterns. We might make small progress here and there, but we won't experience the kind of deep, lasting growth that comes from facing our imperfections head-on. Humility is also about being open to feedback. When someone points out an area where we could improve, it's easy to become defensive. We might feel hurt, embarrassed, or even angry. After all, who wants to be told they're not perfect? But in those moments, we have the opportunity to learn and grow. Feedback, when delivered with kindness and honesty, is one of the most valuable tools we have for improvement. It's only through hearing what others see that we can make the changes necessary to move forward. But in order to accept feedback, we must first let go of our need to be right, to be flawless, to be beyond reproach. We have to humble ourselves and be willing to take a hard look at the ways we can improve. Admitting that we are flawed is not about feeling inferior or less than others. It's about acknowledging that we, like everyone else, have areas where we can grow. It's about accepting that imperfection is part of the human experience. None of us is exempt from having weaknesses, making mistakes, or failing along the way. But it's through these challenges that we learn, that we build resilience, and that we ultimately become better versions of ourselves. The more we resist facing our flaws, the more we delay our progress. The more we cling to our ego and our desire to appear perfect, the less room we leave for growth. In the end, improvement isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming more aware of our limitations, accepting them, and using them as a springboard for change. Humility is the key to this process. It's the willingness to admit when we're wrong, to face our mistakes, and to commit to doing better. Though it may hurt our ego, it's in this discomfort that true growth lies. We all want autonomy, the ability to make our own decisions, control our own lives, and act according to our own values and desires is something we deeply crave. We value independence, the feeling that we are in charge of our own destinies. Autonomy gives us a sense of freedom, a way to shape our lives according to our own vision. But at the same time, there are moments when we long for guidance, when we wish someone would just tell us what to do. In those moments, the independence we usually treasure can feel like a burden. The idea of making all the decisions on our own, constantly navigating the complexities of life without direction, can be overwhelming. Despite our desire for autonomy, there are times when we yearn for structure, for someone else to step in and provide clear guidance. Think about a time when you had to make a difficult decision. Maybe it was a career choice, a relationship issue, or something smaller like where to go on vacation. In theory, the idea of making your own choice might have felt empowering, a chance to exercise your freedom. But as you weighed your options, you may have felt lost or uncertain. You might have wished for someone, whether a mentor, a friend, or even a complete stranger, to just step in and give you a clear answer. The responsibility of making the right decision can be paralyzing. In those moments, autonomy doesn't feel so appealing anymore. The pressure to get it right, the fear of making the wrong choice, can make us crave guidance. This dynamic is especially evident in our professional lives. Many of us aspire to climb the career ladder, to take on more responsibility, and to gain the freedom that comes with autonomy. The idea of being in charge, making decisions that affect our work and our teams, is exciting. But there's another side to this autonomy. When we're in charge, we often feel isolated. The weight of every decision falls on our shoulders. We are responsible for the outcomes, for the success or failure of a project, for the well-being of those we lead. The higher we climb, the less guidance we receive. In a sense, autonomy can become a double-edged sword. We might desire it, but at times it can feel like a lonely and daunting place to be. In those moments, we might wish for the clarity of direction, for someone to step in and tell us what the best course of action is. The need for guidance doesn't stop when we reach the top. In fact, it often grows stronger. Leaders often find themselves seeking advice or mentorship because, despite their autonomy, they feel the weight of responsibility. They may have the power to make decisions, but they also face the challenge of making the right decisions. In these moments, even the most autonomous people seek counsel, looking for guidance to ease the pressure of being in control. They may reach out to peers, hire coaches, or simply rely on past experiences to help them navigate uncertainty. The truth is, even those who seem the most in control often feel the need for someone to provide clarity, to offer advice, or to give them a sense of direction. In our personal lives, we often go through periods of uncertainty where we wish for guidance. It might be about a relationship issue, a health challenge, or a personal goal. Sometimes the endless possibilities available to us can feel overwhelming. We want to make the right choices, but we aren't sure where to start. The decision-making process can be so consuming that it's tempting to give up our autonomy for the comfort of being told what to do. In relationships, this is especially common. We might crave advice from a close friend or family member about how to handle a difficult situation, especially when our emotions are involved. While we may ultimately want to make the decision ourselves, there's something comforting about hearing someone else's perspective, knowing that someone is there to support us and guide us through the process. Autonomy can also feel burdensome when we are faced with a decision that involves risk. The higher the stakes, the harder it is to feel confident in our own judgment. Maybe you're considering a big move, changing careers, or making a significant investment. These are not decisions you can make lightly. The weight of responsibility can make autonomy feel overwhelming. We want the freedom to choose, but sometimes we wish someone would step in and tell us what the best option is. We want to take the risk, but we also want reassurance. The internal conflict between desiring autonomy and seeking guidance is a balancing act we constantly navigate in our lives. Even in situations where we have the power to make choices, we often look for external validation. Social media is a good example of how our autonomy is often influenced by external input. We post pictures, share thoughts, and write about our lives, hoping for likes, comments, and feedback. While we are making a personal choice to share, we also seek approval. We want to feel like our decisions are validated by others. The feedback we get can serve as a form of guidance, a way to reassure ourselves that we are on the right track. It's not that we need constant validation, but the desire for external reassurance is deeply embedded in us. In those moments, our autonomy is shaped by what others think, even though we crave the freedom to express ourselves without outside influence. There's also the paradox of autonomy in the context of family and community. We might crave independence from our parents, from societal expectations, or from traditional norms. We want to be free to make our own choices, live life on our own terms. But even in that pursuit of independence, we still seek the comfort of family or community. We want to make our own decisions, yet there are times when we lean on others for emotional support or advice. When things get tough, when we're unsure of the best path forward, we turn to the people who care about us for guidance, even though we also cherish our freedom. It's a delicate dance between autonomy and interdependence, between wanting to chart our own course and desiring a helping hand when we face uncertainty. This tension between wanting autonomy and seeking guidance is also evident in how we approach personal growth. We want to be independent, to be self-sufficient, to solve our own problems and reach our own potential. But growth often requires learning from others, whether through mentors, teachers, or books. As much as we want to take control of our journey, there are times when we need someone else's perspective or expertise to guide us forward. We might resist asking for help, thinking that we should be able to figure things out on our own. But the truth is that even in our quest for autonomy, we still need the wisdom and experience of others to help us grow. In the end, the desire for autonomy and the need for guidance are not mutually exclusive. We may crave freedom, but that doesn't mean we don't want support. The balance between the two is constantly shifting, and it's okay to need guidance from time to time. Autonomy is important for personal growth and development, but sometimes we need to lean on others for advice, clarity, or support, recognizing that it's okay to seek help while still maintaining control over our decisions allows us to move forward with confidence. We don't have to choose between autonomy and guidance. We can have both, using them as needed to navigate the complexities of life. We all fear being insignificant. The thought of living a life that doesn't stand out, of fading into the background without making an impact, can feel overwhelming. We want to matter, to be seen, to leave a mark. It's a natural desire to want to do something meaningful with our lives, to have our actions count for something. But at the same time, many of us are paralyzed by the pressure to be great. We fear that being average, doing just enough, or not reaching the highest heights of success will lead to feelings of failure. This fear can be so overwhelming that it prevents us from even trying. We end up wasting the very potential we fear to waste, caught between the desire to be extraordinary and the anxiety that comes with trying to achieve it. The idea of being average is frightening. The notion that we might blend in with the crowd, that our lives won't be remembered, or that our work won't be special is unsettling. We want to be exceptional, to stand out for something we've done or achieved. We look around at those who seem to have it all together, those who seem to have found their passion and purpose, and we wonder how they did it. We wish for the same level of success, the same sense of impact, but the road to that kind of greatness often feels unclear. Instead of moving forward, we get stuck in our own thoughts and doubts, too afraid to start because we fear that whatever we do won't be good enough. This fear of insignificance isn't always rational, but it's deeply ingrained in many of us. We see the world around us, filled with people striving for success and recognition, and we think, if I don't achieve something great, will I be remembered? Will my life have mattered? We compare ourselves to others and wonder why we haven't achieved the same level of success. This comparison leads to self-doubt, which can keep us from taking action at all. Instead of pursuing our goals, we hesitate, unsure if we're aiming high enough or doing enough to stand out. At the same time, the pressure to be great becomes paralyzing. We may have big dreams, ambitious goals, and the desire to make an impact, but the fear of not measuring up can stop us in our tracks. The idea of failure, of not living up to our potential, can feel like too much to handle. The desire to be extraordinary can quickly turn into anxiety, making it hard to even start. We think that if we're not going to be the best, then why bother trying? This mindset leads to inaction, to wasting time, and to holding ourselves back from opportunities that could help us grow. Take, for example, a person who dreams of starting a business. They may have a great idea and a passion for the project, but the fear of failure, the fear of being just another business that doesn't succeed, keeps them from moving forward. They imagine the worst-case scenario. What if they fail? What if no one cares about their product? What if they're just another average business? Instead of starting small and taking the first steps, they get stuck in their head, paralyzed by the fear that they won't be able to compete with others or live up to their own expectations. The result is that they never begin the journey, and their potential remains untapped. In relationships, too, the pressure to be great can lead to inaction. We may want to build deep, meaningful connections with others, but the fear of not being good enough, of not offering enough, can make us hesitate. We may worry that if we're not extraordinary, if we don't bring something exceptional to the table, we won't be valued or appreciated. This fear can lead us to hide our true selves, to hold back emotionally, or to avoid putting ourselves out there at all. We get caught up in the idea that we need to be perfect before we can connect with others, but in doing so, we miss out on the real, raw connections that come from simply being ourselves. This pattern of fearing insignificance and being paralyzed by the pressure to be great isn't limited to big goals or major life decisions. It happens in the small moments too. We waste time and energy worrying about the right way to do something, whether it's pursuing a hobby, making a decision, or even just having a conversation. We think that if we don't do it perfectly, it's not worth doing at all. We put off taking action, waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, or the perfect outcome. But in doing so, we waste opportunities. We waste time. We waste our potential. The problem with this mindset is that it often leads to perfectionism. The idea that we need to be exceptional in everything we do becomes overwhelming, and we become afraid to even begin. We see progress as an all-or-nothing endeavor, where if we can't do something at the highest level, then it's not worth doing at all. Perfectionism keeps us stuck in a cycle of self-doubt and inaction. We don't take risks, we don't try new things, and we don't move forward because we're afraid of being average or falling short of our own standards. But perfection is an impossible goal. No one can be perfect in everything, and it's often through mistakes, failure, and learning that we grow the most. One of the reasons we waste potential is that we are so focused on the end result that we forget the value of the process. We think that greatness is something we achieve, a destination we arrive at, but greatness is built over time through consistent effort and growth. It's the small actions, the daily choices, and the willingness to learn from failure that lead to real success. Instead of focusing on achieving something perfect or extraordinary, we should focus on taking the next step, no matter how small it seems. Progress comes from simply showing up and putting in the effort, even when we don't feel ready or when we don't have all the answers. It's the willingness to start, to try, and to keep going that unlocks our true potential. We often miss the opportunity to achieve our potential because we are so focused on what we fear, being average, failing, or not measuring up to some idealized version of success. The truth is that everyone starts somewhere, and no one achieves greatness overnight. It's the willingness to take risks, to embrace failure as part of the journey, and to keep moving forward that makes the difference. If we can let go of the fear of being insignificant and the pressure to be great, we can start taking small steps toward our goals. These steps, taken consistently, will lead us to progress, even if it's not in the dramatic or extraordinary way we envisioned. What we need to recognize is that progress doesn't have to come in leaps and bounds. It can be slow, steady, and imperfect. The fear of being average, the fear of wasting potential, can be overcome by taking action, by stepping out of our comfort zones, and by letting go of the need for everything to be perfect. When we stop measuring our success by how extraordinary it is and instead focus on the process, we open ourselves up to a world of possibilities. Progress is about moving forward, no matter how small the steps may seem. It's about learning, growing, and improving every day. And in doing so, we find that our potential was never wasted. It was just waiting for us to start. We all crave empathy. It's a fundamental part of what makes us human. We want others to understand us, to feel what we feel, and to be there for us when we are struggling. Empathy provides connection, comfort, and reassurance that we're not alone in our experiences. It's a way of sharing our inner world with someone else and feeling seen, heard, and valued. Yet, despite how much we desire empathy from others, we often struggle to give it. It's easier to seek understanding than to offer it, especially when we are caught up in our own emotions or concerns. We want people to understand us, but we don't always make the effort to understand them. When we face difficulties in life, our natural instinct is to seek out empathy. We want people to listen to our problems, to validate our feelings, and to provide support. We may feel frustrated or isolated and crave someone who truly gets it. This desire to be understood is perfectly normal. When we're hurt, angry, or confused, it can be comforting to know that someone else can relate, or at least offer a listening ear. We want to feel that our emotions matter and that others are willing to share in our experiences, providing us with a sense of solidarity. But this need for empathy can make us less aware of the needs of others. We often focus so much on our own struggles that we fail to notice when others are going through something similar. Take, for example, a situation where you are upset about something and you turn to a friend or family member for comfort. You want them to understand why you're upset, to offer support, and to make you feel better. But in your desire for empathy, you might miss the opportunity to extend that same empathy to them. Your friend may be dealing with their own issues, but in that moment, you're so focused on your own feelings that you don't ask them how they're doing or recognize their struggles. You're seeking validation for your own emotions, but you're not offering the same consideration to the other person. In this way, our desire for empathy can sometimes make us blind to the needs of those around us. The challenge lies in balancing the need for empathy with the ability to give it. It's not that we don't want to be empathetic. It's that we often find it difficult to step outside of our own experiences and truly understand what someone else is going through. When we are consumed by our own emotions, it's easy to forget that others have their own struggles and needs. We may listen to them, but we don't always make the effort to fully understand their perspective. Instead, we might respond with advice, judgment, or a desire to fix the situation, rather than simply offering the empathy and support they need. This is particularly true when we don't share the same experiences as the person we're trying to empathize with. It's easy to offer empathy when we can relate to someone's situation, when we've been through something similar ourselves. But what about when someone is dealing with something completely outside our experience? It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, "I don't understand why they're upset about this," or "This isn't a big deal, they should just move on." We minimize their struggles because we don't see them through the lens of our own experiences. In doing so, we fail to offer the genuine empathy they need. We forget that empathy is not about solving someone's problems or making them feel better immediately. It's about acknowledging their feelings, validating their experiences, and being there for them in a way that shows we care. The truth is, offering empathy requires us to be present with someone else's emotions, even if we don't fully understand them. It requires us to listen deeply, without judgment, and to give space for the other person's feelings. This is difficult to do when we're caught up in our own emotions or struggles. We might be so focused on our own needs that we fail to give the same attention to others. In these moments, empathy becomes a one-sided exchange. We want people to be there for us, but we don't always take the time to be there for them. Empathy also involves vulnerability. When we truly empathize with someone, we open ourselves up to their pain, their fears, and their struggles. This can be uncomfortable, especially when we don't have easy solutions or when their feelings bring up our own unresolved emotions. It's easier to listen and then move on, to avoid diving into the emotional depths of someone else's experience. But real empathy requires us to engage with those emotions, to sit with them, and to acknowledge them, even if we don't have all the answers. It's about being willing to feel what the other person feels, without needing to make it better right away. In our busy lives, it's easy to overlook the importance of empathy. We are often caught up in our own worlds, trying to manage our own responsibilities, navigate our challenges, and achieve our own goals. When someone reaches out to us for support, it can feel like an added burden, especially if we're already stretched thin. Our instinct may be to listen briefly and then move on, offering only the bare minimum of empathy because we don't have the emotional energy to fully engage. Yet, the truth is, offering empathy doesn't require us to solve someone's problems or fix their situation. Sometimes all it takes is being present, truly listening, and acknowledging their feelings. When we give others the space to express themselves, we provide them with a sense of validation and understanding that can be incredibly powerful. There are also times when we may struggle to empathize because we feel disconnected from the other person. It's easy to empathize with those we love and care about, but what about people we don't know as well or those whose experiences are vastly different from our own. Empathy requires us to look beyond our own experiences and imagine what it might be like to walk in someone else's shoes. This can be difficult when we don't have shared experiences or when we don't understand the context of their situation. But even in these moments, empathy is possible. It requires us to suspend judgment, to listen without making assumptions, and to approach the other person's feelings with openness and curiosity. It's about trying to understand, even if we don't have all the answers or if we can't fully relate to their experience. The challenge of empathy is that it requires us to be vulnerable, present, and open. It's easier to focus on our own needs and struggles, to look for empathy when we're the ones in need. But when we focus only on ourselves, we miss the opportunity to truly connect with others. Empathy is about giving, not just receiving. It's about recognizing that others have their own experiences, their own emotions, and their own struggles, and taking the time to acknowledge them. It's about listening without trying to fix, understanding without judgment, and offering support without expecting anything in return. When we can do this, we create a space for deeper connection and trust, and we build stronger, more compassionate relationships. In the end, empathy is not just about feeling understood, it's about understanding others. It's about offering the same care, attention, and presence that we hope to receive in return. We want people to listen to us, to be there for us, but in order to truly connect, we must also be willing to listen, to be present, and to offer our support to others. It's not always easy, but it's in those moments of vulnerability and understanding that true empathy is born. We all say we value authenticity. The idea of being true to ourselves, of presenting our genuine selves to the world, is something that resonates with most of us. We admire people who seem unafraid to be themselves, who don't hide behind masks or put on a facade. Authenticity feels like a breath of fresh air, especially in a world that often feels fake or shallow. But the reality is that, despite our value for authenticity, we often perform. We put on different faces, show only parts of ourselves, and craft curated images of our lives. This is especially true in the world of social media, where image often trumps reality. The pressure to appear perfect, happy, and successful online can be overwhelming. Think about the last time you posted something on social media. Did you choose your words carefully, pick the best photo, or filter the image to make it look just right? Most of us do. We create an image of ourselves that we want others to see, a version that highlights our strengths and achievements while hiding our flaws and struggles. In doing so, we perform for an audience, whether it's friends, family, or complete strangers. The desire to be liked, admired, or even envied can lead us to present a version of ourselves that doesn't always reflect who we truly are. We carefully craft our online presence, curating posts that make us look our best, rather than simply sharing who we really are in the moment. For example, we often share the highlights of our lives, vacations, celebrations, and accomplishments, while keeping the less glamorous parts hidden. We might post a picture of ourselves enjoying a beautiful day at the beach, but we don't share the fact that we spent hours stressing over the details of the trip or that we had a fight with a friend just before we left. We might talk about a promotion at work, but we leave out the late nights, the stress, and the sacrifices that came with it. In these moments, we're performing, showing only what fits the narrative we want to present to the world. It's not that we're lying, but we're only telling part of the story, the part that makes us look good. This tendency to perform is often driven by the desire for approval. We want others to see us as successful, happy, and confident. Social media, in particular, has created an environment where external validation is constantly sought. We post things with the hope that people will like, comment, and share. The more likes and comments we get, the more we feel validated, as if our worth is somehow tied to our online image. This desire for validation can make it hard to be authentic because we begin to shape our behavior and our posts around what we think others want to see, rather than what truly represents us. Even in situations where we might feel vulnerable or unsure, we often perform. Consider how many times you've posted a picture or shared a thought with the intention of receiving validation, not because you felt genuinely compelled to share, but because you wanted the approval of others. Maybe you've posted a picture of yourself looking happy or successful, even though you weren't feeling that way inside. We all do it, whether we realize it or not. Social media has turned our lives into a performance, where every post is a chance to show off the life we want others to believe we have, rather than the life we're actually living. The problem with this constant performance is that it creates a disconnect between who we are and what we present. We can get so caught up in the need to perform that we lose sight of our true selves. We become more focused on how we're perceived than on who we really are. It's easy to forget that authenticity is not just about being genuine in the real world, but also about being genuine online. When we constantly perform for others, we risk losing touch with the parts of ourselves that don't fit into the carefully curated image we've created. This disconnect isn't limited to social media. It can also show up in our daily lives. Many of us perform in our interactions with others, trying to meet the expectations of our friends, family, and colleagues. We present ourselves in ways that we think will make others like us or respect us. We might hold back our true opinions or pretend to be interested in something that we don't actually care about, just to fit in or avoid conflict. The pressure to perform is everywhere. It can make us feel like we're constantly playing a role, rather than just being ourselves. This is exhausting. It's like we're always on stage, always trying to live up to some idealized version of who we should be, rather than embracing who we truly are. At the core of this issue is fear, the fear of being judged or rejected. We fear that if we show our true selves, we won't be accepted. We worry that if we reveal our flaws, our insecurities, or our struggles, others will see us as weak or unworthy. This fear drives us to perform, to hide the parts of ourselves that we think are undesirable. But the truth is, the more we perform, the more disconnected we become from ourselves and from others. People crave authenticity. They want to see the real you, not the version you think they want to see. When we're authentic, we build deeper connections. We invite others to be themselves, too, which creates a space for genuine relationships to form. So why do we continue to perform? Why do we keep curating our lives, even when we know it's not helping us feel more connected or more fulfilled? The answer lies in the validation we get from others. Social media and society in general have created a system where external validation is often valued more than internal validation. We seek approval from others because it gives us a temporary sense of worth. But this kind of validation is fleeting. It doesn't fill the emptiness we might feel inside. We might get a rush from likes or positive comments, but they don't provide the kind of fulfillment that comes from being true to ourselves. Authenticity is difficult because it requires us to embrace vulnerability. It means showing up without filters, without the need for perfection, and without the fear of judgment. It requires us to let go of the performance and to be real, even when it's uncomfortable. But authenticity is the key to true connection. It's what allows us to form meaningful relationships and to find fulfillment in our lives. When we stop performing, when we stop trying to be someone we're not, we create space for the people who truly value us for who we are. It's in those moments of honesty and openness that we find the connection and understanding we crave. Ultimately, we need to ask ourselves why we perform in the first place. Is it because we genuinely want to share our experiences? Or is it because we seek external validation? Are we sharing our lives in a way that feels authentic? Or are we shaping them to meet the expectations of others? If we can find the courage to be ourselves, to be vulnerable and imperfect, we can create a life that is more aligned with who we truly are. The real freedom comes not from crafting a perfect image, but from embracing the authenticity that comes with letting go of the need to perform. We all want to grow old. It's a simple truth that many of us share. We hope to live long enough to see our children grow, to experience the world, and to grow wiser with age. The idea of having a long life is comforting. It promises more time to explore, to connect with others, and to enjoy the things we love. We imagine ourselves surrounded by loved ones, sharing stories, and reflecting on the richness of life. But while we long for the opportunity to live a long life, the reality of aging often feels different. As the years pass, we begin to feel the weight of time, and with that comes a fear of losing our vitality, of losing control over our bodies, and of facing the changes that come with growing older. The idea of getting older sounds good, but when we feel the years catching up with us, it becomes a source of anxiety and concern. The fear of aging isn't something we like to talk about, but it's something that many of us experience. There's an unspoken pressure to stay young, to preserve our looks and abilities as long as possible. We live in a culture that values youth, youthful energy, youthful appearance, and youthful success. Advertisements show us how to fight aging, promising creams, treatments, and procedures to maintain our youthful glow. Society tells us that getting older means getting weaker, less attractive, and less capable. As we age, we are reminded of the inevitable decline that awaits us, and this reminder is often accompanied by the fear of what we will lose along the way. The first signs of aging are subtle. Maybe it's a few more lines around the eyes or a slight stiffness in the joints. We brush them off as part of life, not giving them much thought. But as the years go by, the changes become harder to ignore. The aches become more frequent, the energy levels dip, and we begin to feel more tired. Tasks that once seemed easy now require more effort. We don't bounce back as quickly from illness or fatigue. We may start to notice how others treat us differently as we age, whether it's the way we're viewed in the workplace or the way people speak to us. What once felt like the peak of our lives now begins to feel like the beginning of the end. And suddenly, the long life we once hoped for feels daunting. We want to grow old, but we fear the reality of what that will look like. The fear isn't just about losing physical abilities, it's also about the loss of identity. As we age, we can feel like we're no longer the person we once were. We may struggle with a shift in how we see ourselves. Youth is often tied to productivity, vitality, and success. As we get older, we may begin to question whether we are still relevant. We fear becoming invisible or worse, becoming dependent on others for things we used to do with ease. This fear of losing ourselves can be just as frightening as the physical changes that come with aging. We want to grow old, but we don't want to lose the sense of self that has defined us for so long. There's also the fear of outliving our loved ones. Growing old means saying goodbye to people we've shared our lives with. The thought of living without those we love, of watching friends and family members pass away, is a heavy weight to bear. We may fear being alone in our later years, separated from the people who matter most. This fear is compounded by the reality that the older we get, the more likely it becomes that we will lose people close to us. Aging becomes not just about our own physical decline, but also about facing the inevitable loss of others. But despite all of these fears, there is a part of us that still wants to grow old. The idea of a long life brings with it a sense of continuity. We want to be around for the people we love, to see how life unfolds, and to continue experiencing the world. We want to have the time to reflect on what we've accomplished, to make amends, and to leave behind a legacy. We don't want to let go of the potential that comes with age. In many ways, growing older allows us to gain perspective and wisdom to understand the things we once didn't. There's value in looking back on a life well lived, in seeing the connections we've made and the lessons we've learned. But this desire to grow old comes with a silent understanding that the years will take their toll. There are also moments when we begin to appreciate the benefits of aging. As we grow older, we may find ourselves letting go of the pressures we once placed on ourselves. We become more comfortable with who we are, less concerned with the opinions of others. We stop chasing the things we thought we needed and begin to enjoy the simpler things. We may develop deeper connections with others, not based on superficial factors, but on shared experiences and understanding. Aging can bring a sense of peace, an acceptance of life's impermanence, and a greater appreciation for the present. But that doesn't mean the fear of aging disappears. We still worry about the physical decline, the loss of energy, and the limitations that come with age. The truth is that aging is a double-edged sword. We long for the wisdom, the experience, and the time that come with getting older, but we also fear the physical and emotional toll it takes. It's hard to reconcile these two desires, to want to grow old, but to fear the reality of it. The key lies in how we choose to approach aging. Rather than focusing solely on the fear of what we might lose, we can try to embrace the changes that come with age. Aging is a natural process, and with it comes the opportunity to redefine our relationship with time, with others, and with ourselves. In the end, the fear of aging is not just about the loss of youth, health, or beauty. It's about confronting the reality of our own mortality. But it's also about embracing the potential for growth that comes with age. The challenge is to live fully, to find joy in the present, and to accept that the passage of time is inevitable. We want to grow old, but we also fear the unknown that comes with it. Yet, perhaps it's in this very uncertainty that the richness of life is found. The fear of aging may never disappear, but it doesn't have to keep us from living fully in the years we have. We all seek meaning. It's a fundamental desire that shapes so much of what we do. We want to know why we're here, what our purpose is, and what the point of it all is. From the moment we're old enough to ask questions, we're curious about the world and our place in it. We find comfort in the idea that our lives have meaning, that our actions matter, and that there's a bigger picture at play. Purpose gives us direction, something to strive toward, a reason to get up in the morning. Yet, despite this craving for meaning, the search for it can be terrifying. The answers we find or fail to find can shake us to our core. The desire for purpose is universal. Whether it's the pursuit of a career, building relationships, or making an impact in the world, we all want to feel that what we're doing matters. This need for meaning is woven into every part of our lives, from the way we spend our time to the values we hold. When we're young, the meaning we seek often comes from others, our families, our communities, or society. We're given stories, traditions, and roles that tell us who we are supposed to be and what we're meant to do. These external sources of meaning help guide us and give us a sense of stability. But as we grow older, the certainty that came with those external answers begins to fade. We start to ask bigger questions. Why are we here? What is the true purpose of our lives? These questions can be unsettling. We might find ourselves questioning the roles we've been given, the goals we've been pursuing, and the beliefs we've held. We start to realize that meaning isn't always something that's handed to us. It's something we have to seek, often with no clear answers in sight. The search for meaning can lead us down paths that we didn't expect, and sometimes, the deeper we look, the more disorienting it becomes. At first, the search for meaning can feel invigorating. It's a journey that promises answers, growth, and a clearer understanding of who we are and why we exist. But as we dig deeper, we begin to encounter questions that don't have easy answers. What if there's no inherent meaning to life? What if we're just here by chance, and nothing we do truly matters? These kinds of thoughts can be overwhelming. They challenge everything we've ever believed and leave us feeling small and insignificant. The search for purpose can feel like standing at the edge of an abyss, staring into the unknown. The more we search, the more we realize how little we actually know. The answers we find can be unsatisfying or worse, non-existent. This uncertainty can be unsettling. Consider a time when you've wondered about your own purpose, maybe during a moment of personal struggle or change. When things aren't going as planned, it's easy to ask, what's the point of all this? It's a question that can leave us feeling vulnerable, like we're lost at sea without a compass. When we experience setbacks or face challenges, it can feel like we're spinning our wheels, unsure of where we're headed. The discomfort of this uncertainty can lead us to question everything. Is the career I've chosen the right one? Are the relationships I'm building meaningful? Is the life I'm leading aligned with the purpose I want to fulfill? These questions can feel all-consuming, and when the answers don't come easily, it's easy to spiral into doubt. But even when we do find answers, they aren't always comforting. The idea of having a clear, defined purpose might sound appealing, but the reality of knowing exactly what we're meant to do with our lives can be overwhelming. What if the answers we find require us to change everything about who we are or how we live? What if the path to meaning is one that forces us to let go of things we've grown attached to or beliefs that have shaped us? Purpose might give us direction, but it can also shake us to the core, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world around us. The fear of finding meaning is not just about confronting uncomfortable answers. It's also about the fear of not finding any answers at all. What if the search for meaning leads us to the conclusion that there is no grand purpose? What if we're just here to live and die with no greater reason behind it? This thought can be a hard pill to swallow. It challenges the very foundation of how we approach life. If nothing we do truly matters, then what's the point of trying? The fear of a meaningless existence can be paralyzing. It leads us to wonder if everything we've worked for, everything we've strived for, is ultimately pointless. It's a fear that many people face, whether they express it outwardly or not. The idea of being adrift in a world without meaning is deeply unsettling. It calls into question not just what we do, but who we are. Yet, despite the fear and uncertainty, the search for meaning is also what makes us human. It's what drives us to create, to connect, and to explore. We look for meaning because it helps us make sense of the world and find purpose in our lives. Even when the answers are unclear or difficult to accept, the search itself provides us with a sense of direction. It keeps us moving forward, pushing us to grow and learn, even when the road is uncertain. The very act of searching for meaning is what gives life its richness. It's through that search that we discover new aspects of ourselves and the world around us. This search for meaning also teaches us to live with uncertainty. While we may never find a definitive answer to life's big questions, we can still find meaning in the moments we experience. We can create meaning through the relationships we build, the work we do, and the passions we pursue. Even in the absence of clear answers, life can still be fulfilling. Meaning is not just something that is found, it's something that is created. It's found in the way we choose to live, the way we engage with others, and the values we hold. We can choose to make our lives meaningful by embracing the journey, by living with intention, and by accepting that the answers we seek may not come easily or all at once. The fear of existential questions and the desire for purpose are both deeply tied to our humanity. We want meaning, but we also fear what that meaning might reveal. The search for purpose can shake us to the core because it forces us to confront our own vulnerability, our own mortality, and our own uncertainties. But it's also through this search that we learn more about ourselves and the world we live in. Meaning may not always come in the form we expect, but the journey itself provides us with an understanding that transcends any one answer. It's in the process of questioning, seeking, and experiencing that we find the purpose we're looking for. Even if the answers are unclear or unsettling, the search itself is what gives our lives depth and richness. We admire rebels. There's something magnetic about people who break the rules, who stand up against the system, and who go against the grain. Rebels are often seen as bold, free-spirited, and fearless. They challenge the status quo, question what's accepted, and push boundaries. We look at them and think, I wish I could be that confident, that strong, that unique. They embody the idea of individuality, the desire to be different from everyone else. And yet, in reality, most of us cling to conformity. We fear standing out too much, worried about what others might think or how we'll be judged. We want to be unique, but we want to do it within the safety of the group. Everyone wants to be different, but they want to be different together. Think about the trends that take off in society. Whether it's fashion, music, or a lifestyle choice, there's always a desire to stand out, to be part of something unique. People look for ways to express their individuality, often through clothing, hairstyles, or even political beliefs. But as much as we strive to be distinct, we often do it by following a pattern. People follow the latest trends because they want to fit in with a specific group of individuals who share the same taste. In this way, individuality is achieved within the context of conformity. We want to be different, but we want that difference to be accepted by others, which often means adopting the same labels, styles, or beliefs that everyone else is adopting. Take fashion, for example. People often say they want to express their true selves through what they wear. Yet, if you look closely, the desire for self-expression often mirrors the choices of others. A certain style might be labeled as rebellious or alternative, but when everyone starts wearing it, it becomes just another trend. In this sense, people are rebelling, but they're rebelling in a way that's socially acceptable. There's comfort in knowing that while you're trying to be unique, you're still part of a larger group. It's a balancing act between wanting to stand out and not wanting to be left behind. The desire to be different is always tempered by the need to fit in, to be part of something larger than ourselves. In the workplace, this dynamic is just as visible. People often say they want to make a difference, to be innovative, or to bring fresh ideas to the table. But when it comes time to actually challenge the norm or take risks, many hesitate. The corporate world rewards conformity to a large extent. There are expectations, standards that define what's considered acceptable behavior, appearance, or thinking. In the pursuit of success, many individuals suppress their rebellious urges in favor of following the established path. They might have bold ideas or creative thoughts, but they keep them to themselves, fearing that standing out too much could jeopardize their position. The irony is that people who do manage to break the mold, those who truly stand out, are often celebrated for it, but only once they've made it through the gauntlet of acceptance. This tension between individuality and conformity is also clear in our social lives. Everyone wants to feel like they belong, but everyone also wants to feel like they're different from the crowd. People form groups based on shared interests, but those groups often have unspoken rules about what's acceptable behavior, what you should wear, how you should act, and even what opinions you should have. Within these groups, individuality is valued, but only as long as it doesn't disrupt the flow of the group dynamic. This often leads to a paradox. People in these groups may feel they are standing out and expressing themselves, but the truth is, they are simply following a different set of expectations, ones that are more tailored to their particular subculture, but still rooted in conformity. Consider how people choose political or social identities. In some circles, being different means aligning with a particular set of progressive ideals, while in others, it may mean adhering to conservative principles. Both groups can be just as insistent on their uniqueness, but both are ultimately conforming to a shared belief system. The desire to be different is often rooted in belonging to a group that validates those differences. People may protest, argue, or voice their unique opinions, but they often do so in a way that aligns with a group identity, whether it's a political movement, a social cause, or a cultural trend. The individuality they express is shaped by the very conformity they claim to resist. This need to be unique, yet part of a group, plays out in more personal ways as well. People might tell themselves that they are independent thinkers, making decisions based on their own judgment, yet how often do we make choices based on what others expect? We pick a college because it's what our family wants, or we take a job because it aligns with societal expectations of success. Even in relationships, we might try to be unique by dating someone who is different from everyone else, yet we often still choose partners who fit certain molds of acceptable relationships. We are all seeking something that feels different, but we often seek it within the confines of what is considered socially acceptable. The desire for individuality within a collective framework is also tied to the way we form our identities. We grow up trying to define who we are, but part of that process involves understanding how we relate to others. We want to be seen as unique, but we also want to be accepted. We want to be recognized for our individual qualities, yet we often identify with larger groups, whether they're based on culture, profession, hobbies, or beliefs. Our sense of self is constantly shaped by the tension between these two desires, being different and being part of something. This push and pull between individuality and conformity is deeply embedded in our social and cultural systems. It's what makes trends, movements, and even revolutions so compelling. People want to change the world, but they also want to do so in a way that feels familiar, a way that resonates with others who share similar desires. The greatest rebellions often emerge not from individuals standing completely alone, but from groups of people who share a common sense of difference. The Beatles didn't just make music that stood apart, they helped create a cultural movement that many others joined. The same can be said for nearly every social or cultural shift. The rebels who make the most impact are the ones who inspire others to follow, to join, to align with a common cause. It's fascinating how, in our desire to be unique, we often end up conforming to a new set of norms that simply reflect a different kind of groupthink. We want to be different, but we want to be different together. We want to challenge the status quo, but we do it in a way that is still accepted by those around us. And that's where the tension lies. We admire rebels, but we are also deeply afraid of standing out too much, of being isolated, of being too different. The idea of being seen as too different is often scarier than being part of a group. In the end, the desire to be unique while still belonging is a balancing act that most of us navigate throughout our lives. We want to express ourselves, to stand out in some way, but we also want to connect with others, to share in experiences, and to feel accepted. In the pursuit of individuality, we often find ourselves following trends, joining groups, and adhering to expectations that align with our sense of self but still tie us to a collective identity. We all want to be different, but we want to do it together. And that shared pursuit of uniqueness within a group context is what shapes so many of the movements and trends that define our lives. We all like to think of ourselves as kind people. We believe that, deep down, we're capable of great empathy, compassion, and care. We smile at strangers, lend a hand to those in need, and share our resources when we can. These acts of kindness feel natural, and they make us feel good about ourselves. Kindness is a trait we admire in others, and we strive to embody it in our own lives. Yet, despite our capacity for kindness, we are also capable of cruelty. We hurt people, sometimes without even realizing it. It can be as simple as an offhand comment that we didn't think twice about, or a decision made without considering its impact on others. We can do harm without meaning to, and it's often these small acts, the ones that don't seem significant at the time, that build up and leave lasting scars. Think about how often we make judgments about others. It's easy to judge someone based on their appearance, their choices, or their behavior. We may think we're just stating an opinion, but in doing so, we may be reinforcing harmful stereotypes or adding to someone's sense of insecurity. A comment about someone's weight, appearance, or lifestyle might seem harmless to us, but for the person on the receiving end, it can be a painful reminder of their own perceived flaws. We might not intend to cause harm, but we do simply because we don't take the time to consider the impact of our words. It's easy to forget that a small moment of cruelty, even one that seems insignificant, can linger with someone long after the words are spoken. This happens in our personal relationships too. We can be cruel to those we care about without realizing it. Maybe we snap at a family member when we're stressed, or we say something dismissive when we're frustrated with a friend. These moments of irritation, when we let our emotions take over, can be damaging. The person on the receiving end might feel hurt, rejected, or unimportant, even though we never meant to make them feel that way. We get caught up in our own thoughts and frustrations, and we forget that the way we speak to others can have a lasting effect. Kindness can feel easy when we're in a good mood, but when we're tired, stressed, or upset, it's much harder to be thoughtful and patient. In those moments, our capacity for cruelty can emerge without us realizing it. Our capacity for cruelty can also show up in how we treat people who are different from us. Whether it's someone from a different culture, a different socioeconomic background, or with different beliefs, it's easy to make assumptions or treat them with less respect. We might not actively try to hurt them, but we can dismiss their experiences, undermine their ideas, or look down on them without thinking about how it makes them feel. Even when we believe we're being tolerant or open-minded, we can still perpetuate harmful ideas through our actions, even if they come from a place of ignorance rather than malice. The cruelty lies not in what we mean to do, but in how we fail to consider the humanity of others. Sometimes, the cruelty we commit is less about words or actions and more about inaction. Think about the times when we've seen someone in need, but we didn't step in to help. We might have seen someone struggling with heavy bags and walked by, or we might have overheard someone being bullied but stayed silent. In these moments, our failure to act can be just as damaging as direct cruelty. When we fail to stand up for others or offer support when it's needed, we contribute to their pain without actively intending to do so. We might not realize the weight of our inaction, but the absence of kindness can leave someone feeling invisible or unsupported. The danger of unintentional cruelty is that it's often unnoticed. We go about our lives thinking we're good people trying to do the right thing. We may even pride ourselves on our kindness, believing we are constantly acting with good intentions. But sometimes those good intentions don't translate into positive actions. We overlook how our words or behavior might affect others, and as a result, we can unintentionally hurt them. The cruelty that comes from these moments is often silent, buried beneath the surface. We may never realize that we've caused harm, or the person we hurt may never speak up. And so we continue to move through life, unaware of the damage we've done. The impact of unintentional cruelty is compounded by how difficult it can be to repair. When we hurt someone deliberately, we can often make amends. Apologies, conversations, and actions can help heal the wounds. But when cruelty happens unintentionally, it's harder to recognize, harder to confront, and harder to fix. The person on the receiving end might not even realize that we didn't mean to hurt them. They might carry the pain of that moment without understanding why it happened, and we might never fully grasp the depth of the harm we've caused. It becomes a cycle of unintentional hurt, where neither side can address the issue properly. This pattern is not limited to personal relationships. It also plays out in society at large. We live in a world where people are often quick to judge, quick to categorize, and quick to dismiss others. The media, social circles, and even our workplaces can perpetuate this culture of unintentional cruelty. We create environments where people are expected to fit into certain molds, to adhere to particular standards, and to behave in certain ways. Those who don't fit in can feel rejected, misunderstood, or unseen. We don't always realize the impact of these expectations, but they can cause lasting harm to people who are trying to find their place in the world. In a society that prioritizes conformity, individuality can sometimes feel like a source of cruelty, even though it's not intended that way. The cruelty we commit often comes from a lack of awareness. We get caught up in our own lives, our own concerns, and our own stress, and in doing so, we forget to consider how our actions affect others. We might think we're just speaking our minds, just being honest, just trying to get through the day. But in doing so, we might be leaving someone else feeling hurt or rejected. This is the quiet form of cruelty, the kind that doesn't make headlines or start arguments, but the kind that leaves a subtle, lasting impact. It's in the small, unnoticed moments that the harm is done. It's in the offhand comment, the unacknowledged struggle, the failure to act when needed. We all want to be kind. We want to treat others with respect and compassion. But the truth is, we're not always aware of the impact of our actions. Sometimes, kindness can be difficult to practice, especially when we're dealing with our own frustrations or emotional baggage. But it's important to remember that kindness isn't just about grand gestures. It's about being aware of how we treat others in the everyday moments, the words we say, the actions we take, and the decisions we make. By being more mindful of our impact on others, we can reduce the cruelty that we may unintentionally cause. It requires us to listen more, reflect more, and be more intentional in our interactions. Only by becoming more aware of our actions can we truly be kind. We are wired for cooperation. From the moment we are born, we are part of a network of relationships. Our survival depends on the cooperation of those around us, whether it's our parents, caregivers, or the communities we are born into. Humans, by nature, thrive when they work together. Cooperation allows us to share resources, divide tasks, and achieve goals that would be impossible to reach alone. It's a fundamental part of our social structure. Yet, at the same time, we are drawn to competition. There is something in us that pushes us to be the best, to stand out, and to prove ourselves. Success often feels like it can only be achieved when we're beating someone else, when we're ahead of the pack. The tension between cooperation and competition is something we experience constantly. Think about a team project at work or school. Ideally, cooperation should be the driving force, everyone working together, sharing ideas, and helping each other reach the same goal. But even in these situations, competition can creep in. One person may feel the need to take charge, to show that their ideas are the best. Another person might become more concerned with their individual performance than with the team's success. The success of the group depends on cooperation, but the desire for individual recognition often leads to competition. In these moments, survival, defined by individual achievement or status, feels at odds with the need for collective effort. The tension is not always obvious, but it's there, influencing how we behave, how we think, and how we relate to others. The same dynamic plays out in our personal lives. We often think of success as something we achieve alone, something that we win or accomplish by being better than others. Whether it's a career goal, a personal milestone, or a competitive sport, we define success by how far ahead we are compared to those around us. At the same time, we need cooperation to get to where we want to be. We rely on colleagues, friends, and family to support us, to offer advice, or to provide the resources we need to succeed. We want to succeed on our own terms, but we can't do it without the help of others. We are torn between the instinct to compete and the need to cooperate, and it's not always clear which path will lead to the success we seek. At the heart of this conflict is our need for survival. Competition is driven by the desire to secure our place in the world, to ensure that we have what we need to survive, whether that's financial stability, career advancement, or social status. The world often rewards those who stand out, who push ahead, who prove that they are capable of achieving greatness. We are conditioned to see success as something that can only come when we outpace others. This is especially true in a society that places high value on individual achievement and personal ambition. When survival is tied to competition, cooperation can feel secondary or even unnecessary. Yet, survival is not just about individual success. We also survive by helping each other. It's in the very nature of human society to rely on others. We form connections, build networks, and exchange resources in order to thrive. Think about a family. Parents, siblings, and extended family members cooperate with each other to share responsibilities, provide emotional support, and create a stable environment for everyone. Their success depends on cooperation, on working together toward shared goals. It's not about one person winning or standing out. It's about the collective effort that sustains everyone. Even in larger social structures like communities or nations, cooperation is essential. Without it, survival becomes much harder. We need each other, even when it feels like competition is the only way forward. This tension between cooperation and competition also plays out in the workplace. In many professions, the expectation is that we will collaborate with colleagues, but there's also an underlying pressure to outshine them. We may need the support of others to achieve a shared goal, but the promotion, the raise, or the recognition often goes to the person who stands out the most. The success of the team is measured by how well each individual performs, and that can create a competitive environment where collaboration takes a backseat. We find ourselves working together in one moment and competing in the next. Our survival, in this case, is defined not just by the team's success but by our own ability to prove that we are the best at what we do. And it's not just about work or career. This same tension exists in other areas of life as well, such as sports or even friendships. Think of a group of friends who support each other but also feel a sense of competition. One friend might get a promotion or accomplish something significant, and the others might feel happy for them but also a little envious. They want to celebrate the success of others, but they can't help but compare themselves to their peers. The desire to succeed is not just about personal fulfillment. It's also about being seen, being recognized, and standing out. Even in relationships where cooperation is key, there's an underlying desire to be the best or to be acknowledged for personal achievements. The success of the group feels intertwined with the need for individual recognition. At a deeper level, this conflict between competition and cooperation speaks to our understanding of success. We often think of success as something that is finite, something that must be earned and claimed. We are taught that success means winning, outpacing others, and being at the top. But this mindset can leave us feeling disconnected, as though our success is only meaningful if it's measured by how much we've surpassed others. The problem with this approach is that it isolates us. It creates a narrative where success is a race, and others are seen as obstacles or competitors, rather than collaborators. When we view success this way, it becomes harder to find fulfillment in working with others. We can't fully embrace cooperation if we see success as something that only comes when we defeat others. The reality, though, is that success is not a zero-sum game. It's not about how much we beat others. It's about how much we grow and how much we contribute to the well-being of the collective. Survival does require individual effort, but it also requires cooperation. We may feel the pull of competition, but the truth is that true success comes when we can balance individual achievement with a sense of shared purpose. When we help others succeed, when we work together to achieve something meaningful, we all rise. That's the paradox of cooperation and competition. While we may be wired to compete, we can only thrive if we recognize the value of working together. This tension between competition and cooperation can be seen in all aspects of our lives. It plays out in our workplaces, our relationships, our communities, and even our inner thoughts. We want to be successful, to prove ourselves, to secure our place in the world. But we also need each other. Success doesn't have to come at the expense of others. In fact, the most sustainable success comes from recognizing that we are all in this together. By working collaboratively, by embracing cooperation even in the midst of competition, we can achieve more than we ever could alone. The challenge is learning to balance these instincts, the desire to compete with the need to cooperate, and realizing that they don't have to be at odds. They can, in fact, coexist in a way that benefits us all. We are both the hero and the villain in our own story. The way we see ourselves is often shaped by the choices we make, the actions we take, and the narrative we tell ourselves about who we are. When we think about the hero, we often imagine someone who is brave, kind, and selfless. The hero does what's right, faces challenges head-on, and stands up for others. But in reality, we're also capable of being the villain. We make decisions that hurt others, sometimes knowingly, sometimes without realizing it, and justify those actions in ways that make us feel justified. The conflict between these two roles is something we all experience. The hero in us wants to be seen as good, while the villain in us sometimes takes actions that betray our own sense of morality. When we do something wrong, it's rare that we view ourselves as the villain. Instead, we often try to justify our actions, explaining them away in a way that makes us feel like we were in the right all along. For example, think about a time when you snapped at someone close to you, maybe a family member or a friend. In the moment, it may have felt like the right thing to do. Maybe you were stressed, overwhelmed, or frustrated, and that anger seemed like the only way to release the pressure building inside. Afterward, you might justify your actions by telling yourself that you had a good reason for it. You might think, they should have known better, or I didn't have any other way to express my frustration. This inner dialogue helps to smooth over the guilt or discomfort we feel after hurting someone. The problem is that we're not always able to fully recognize the harm we cause. We see ourselves as the hero, justified by the circumstances, while the person we hurt sees the villain in us. We also justify our actions when we hurt others for personal gain. Think of a time when you've made a decision that benefited you, but may have caused harm to someone else. Maybe you took credit for a team's work in a meeting, or you made a choice at work that helped you advance, even though it left someone else behind. In these situations, it's easy to convince ourselves that we did what we had to do to succeed. We tell ourselves that we had no choice or that it was a part of the game. Perhaps we even convince ourselves that we were just being smart or strategic. By focusing on our own success, we rationalize the harm we cause to others. In doing so, we play the role of the hero in our own narrative, but at the expense of others, making us the villain in their story. We are quick to justify our actions because, in our minds, the ends justify the means. This internal conflict between the hero and the villain shows up in smaller, everyday decisions too. Think about how often we bend the truth or avoid taking responsibility for mistakes. It's easy to justify these actions by thinking they won't cause much harm. If we lie to avoid a confrontation or protect our reputation, we might tell ourselves, it's just a small thing, and it doesn't really matter. Or when we make excuses for not following through on a promise, we might think, I was too busy, and I didn't mean to let them down. These justifications allow us to maintain the image of the hero, the person who means well but is sometimes forced to take shortcuts or make compromises. Meanwhile, the person we've lied to or let down is left to deal with the consequences of our actions. We fail to see ourselves as the villain, but they do. The problem with this cycle of justification is that it becomes harder to break. The more we justify our actions, the less accountable we are for the harm we cause. We start to view ourselves through a distorted lens, one where we can do no wrong. We become the hero in our own story, and the more we convince ourselves that our actions are justified, the easier it becomes to hurt others without fully realizing it. The villain, once acknowledged, becomes buried under layers of excuses and rationalizations. It's not that we intend to harm others, but our justifications allow us to ignore the impact of our actions. In relationships, this tension between hero and villain can be especially painful. We want to be seen as loving, caring, and considerate, but we're also human. We get angry, frustrated, and selfish. And when we do something that causes pain, we often try to justify it, either to ourselves or to the other person. Think of an argument where you hurt someone you love. In the heat of the moment, words are said that can't be taken back. You might later try to justify it by saying, "I only said that because I was hurt too," or "They made me feel like I had no choice but to react this way." While these justifications help ease the guilt, they also prevent us from fully owning the hurt we caused. The person we've hurt may see us as the villain in that moment, and our refusal to acknowledge our own role in the situation can keep the cycle going. We are constantly balancing these two roles, the hero and the villain. We want to be the good person, the one who does the right thing, the one who helps and uplifts others. But we are also capable of actions that harm, whether intentional or not. The more we justify our behavior, the more we distance ourselves from the impact it has on others. The villain in us is not always loud or obvious. It's subtle, buried under layers of rationalizations and excuses. We become blind to our own faults because we're focused on how right we are in our own eyes. This struggle between the hero and the villain within us can also affect our relationship with ourselves. When we act in ways that we later regret, it's easy to dismiss it as a mistake, something we can brush off. But the longer we justify those actions, the harder it becomes to make amends or learn from our mistakes. We start to believe that our actions, however hurtful, were somehow warranted, and we become trapped in a cycle of guilt, shame, and defensiveness. We convince ourselves that we're good people, even when our actions don't align with that belief. Over time, this disconnect between our intentions and our actions can erode our self-esteem, leading to feelings of internal conflict. The challenge is to recognize both the hero and the villain in our own story. We can't simply ignore the moments when we act out of selfishness, anger, or fear. The first step in breaking the cycle of justification is to be honest with ourselves about the harm we cause, no matter how small. Acknowledging that we are both capable of great kindness and unintentional cruelty allows us to take responsibility for our actions and work toward becoming better. By doing so, we can shift the narrative we tell ourselves, moving away from the hero versus villain dichotomy and towards a more honest understanding of who we are. It's not about perfecting ourselves, but about recognizing the complexities of our behavior and making choices that align more closely with our true values. Only then can we stop justifying harm and start actively working to reduce it, both to others and to ourselves.